Welcome, everybody. It's so awesome to be here. Want to welcome you to the Virtual Survivor Caregiver Summit. We have planned a very special day full of information about science of gynecologic cancer, survival, survivorship, and advocacy. IGCS fully supports patient advocacy as essential to our mission of enhancing the care of women with gynecologic cancers globally. My name is Dr. Rob Coleman, and I'm a gynecologic oncologist here in sunny and still humid, I might add, Houston, Texas. And I currently serve the privileged role of IGCS president. This is a very important and special event for all of us. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. I would be remiss if I didn't first thank everyone behind the scenes that have worked so hard to make this event possible. You guys are amazing, super special, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you to the IGCS staff, the moderators, the presenters to making this event possible. And also a big thank you to our sponsors, AstraZeneca, Clovis Oncology, and GSK. Now I want to take the opportunity to celebrate and again recognize the service and dedication of the 3 recipients of the 2021 IGCS Distinguished Advocacy Award, the only international award of its type. We will share their acceptance recipients' remarks.
It's an honor and a privilege to be accepting the IGCS Distinguished Advocacy Award. I'm always amazed by the shift that happens when you connect and empower people to be the change they want to see. Progress against ovarian cancer has taken a group effort. Patients, clinicians, corporate partners, and most importantly, the voices of the women we work with and for are powerful and profound, and they have guided our every move. If you listen and engage, you will always see the way forward. And if you surround yourself with the right partners, everything is possible. As I look forward, this award gives assurance that our work will stand the test of time to have a lasting impact. I share this honor with my team at Ovarian Cancer Canada. 24 years ago, there was no community for women with this disease in Canada. We put tools and resources in place, and women and their families came to the table. This award is for those women. They have been my inspiration every day. Regardless of their health, they found hope and purpose being part of a movement so that others would not have to go through what they did. I also must thank my global colleagues for their collaboration. Despite having so much to do in their own countries, they saw the importance of making good on what we knew was possible to benefit women around the world. To all of you, I say thank you and know that transformational change is possible, not overnight, but with perseverance and determination, you can get there. Together, we've demonstrated that. The work we've done for women with ovarian cancer has been such a positive movement. Thank you for this honor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am extremely honored to receive the IGCS Distinguished Advocacy Award this year, and really so grateful for the IGCS executives for their recognition of my work, of my life, of my efforts. Really, thank you so much to everybody. Well, my story has actually started many, many years ago when I was a resident in gynecology. I have witnessed the fear and anxiety in the eyes of the cancer patient upon diagnosis. However, after successful surgeries and treatments, I realized that they are changing into very hopeful and living eyes. That was my unique motivation, to be the healing hand for them, to be able to touch to their hearts, to be able to improve their well-being. Actually, one patient each time becoming more happy was my real gift. And within years, dozens and dozens of patients were my real motivation. And today, here I am, standing in front of you for such an honorable award. Actually, for me, global female health is in the center of the life. And actually, it's not only me, but all gyne-oncologists in the world deserves actually such an award for their local and regional work on the females. However, I should express some special thanks. First of all, such an award really would not be possible without the inspiration I have received from my patients and from engaged members, from whom I always inspire my energy to do better and better in my advocacy adventures. Thank you so much to ESGO Council and engaged committees for their endless support in my career. On the other hand, some special thanks should go one-to-one. I should thank to Christina Fotopoulou and Dimitri Haitopoulos, who have nominated me for this award. I should also give my special thanks to Ikatut and Esra Yükmez, who have supported all my dreams. Dr. Becker Keskin Kılıç, who opened the doors in my life, my team in Turkish Ministry of Health Cancer Control Department, Hacettepe University deans and rectors, my superiors and my colleagues in Turkish Society of Gyne-Oncology, and my mentor, Ali Ayhan, for sure. Last but not least, of course, with special, coming from my heart, special thanks goes to my wife, my kids, and my family for their endless support in my career. Dear friends, today, in front of you, I promise to be committed to work more in the next coming years, to make more, to promote the well-being of the patients. But let's do this all together, hand in hand. Let's create a better world against gynecological cancer, hand in hand with our patients. Let's use a special motto: working harder to cure our patients is our passionate. Thank you so much to everybody here, to all IGCS and all cancer patients around the world. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you IGCS for Distinguished Advocacy Award. Many congratulations to the winners of IGCS Award 2021 and also to other award applicants who are doing great work in different parts of the world but could not make it this year. My best wishes are with them. I'm a trained radiation oncologist with an additional training in cancer control and prevention from NCI USA. I'm currently working as a teaching faculty in a medical college in the Government of India. I'm working on cancer prevention and advocacy through Pink Chain Campaign and Indian Society of Clinical Oncology since 2010, and it has become part of my life now. This award means a lot to me and belongs to every individual I work with, irrespective of the hierarchy, every institution I had been associated with, and the most important, my cancer patient, who made me more positive, kind, and courageous. Thank you so much for making me more human and humble. So this is for my cancer patient. Today, I am missing my pillar of strength and mentor since childhood, my dad, whom I lost last year to cancer. Being a cancer specialist and son of a cancer patient, I'm committed to strengthen the voice of voiceless cancer patients through our cancer awareness campaigns and advocacy programs. I owe my success to my wife, Dr. Shubham Roy, developmental pediatrician, who supported me throughout this journey for a decade now. Thank you, IGCS, again for this recognition. I'm sure that this opportunity will strengthen us to add more life to each and every day a cancer patient lives. I'm committed to work with IGCS across boundaries to minimize disparities and inequalities.
Well, thank you. It looks like we had a little technical on the last part of that video, but it's just so amazing. I remember seeing these videos before, but just seeing them again, it really inspires me, and I'm so grateful to all of these individuals that have really exemplified the power of advocacy. It is inspirational, and thank you for all of you, these well-deserving individuals, for their honor. So before we get started with the first session, I would like to ask the president of the Gynecologic Oncology Group Foundation to say a few important words regarding the Gynecologic Cancer Awareness Month.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Good morning, and thank you to Mary Aiken and the IGCS for asking me to be here today. I am Dr. Larry Copeland, president of the GOG Foundation, formerly known as the Gynecologic Gynecology Group, and I'm a gynecologic oncologist at the James Cancer Center at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. I'm here today to introduce an award that, cover next slide, please. To introduce an award that was created to honor and recognize the incredible contributions from our dear friend and colleague, Mary Dicey Scroggins. Mary, congratulations on your 25th anniversary of being an ovarian cancer survivor. As you know, Dicey is a 25-year ovarian cancer survivor and health activist who has made a significant impact transforming the standard of care in gynecologic oncology by being the voice from and to patients. For many years, Dicey attended the GOG Foundation Board of Directors as an ex officio member, representing the patient voice and guiding the GOG to better serve their patients, our patients. Most recently, she serves in a similar capacity of advocacy for underrepresented minorities for IGCS. The GOG will be forever grateful for the incredible impact Dicey has made through her service, engagement, cancer survivor perspective, and as chair of the Legacy GOG Patient Advocacy Committee. To honor and continue Dicey's legacy, the GOG Foundation is thrilled to announce the Mary Dicey Scroggins Travel Fund. This fund was created to allow future patient advocates to engage in the same impactful way Dicey has throughout her career and as a volunteer leader. The Dicey Fund will offer travel reimbursement for up to 2 patient advocates to attend the NRG Oncology 2022 semi-annual February meeting, at which time we also have the GOG Foundation meetings. The GOG Foundation will continue to fund this program for future NRG Oncology and GOG semi-annual meetings. We encourage you to submit your application, and we'll also share details through IGCS after this meeting. You can go to the GOG website at www.gog.org and search Dicey in the search toolbar to find the application. Application deadlines are fairly soon, November 15th, 2021. We look forward to receiving your applications. Thank you for your contributions to gynecologic oncology, Dicey. It's an honor to know you and to call you a friend.
Thanks so much, Larry. I wanted to just say a few more things about Dicey. Many of you know her. She's been in this organization for a long time. But you know, in early 2019, she began leading the IGCS's patient advocacy and community outreach efforts as our society's first director of global outreach and engagement. And in just 3 short years, she's completely transformed IGCS's advocacy programs and relationships through educational programming, networking, relationship building, recognition, and the one thing she's so good at, communication. She's also a writer, a producer, and a founding partner of Pinky Hugs, LLC, a mother-daughter writing and film production firm that specializes in social justice-focused documentaries. That was something I didn't know either. She's also a co-founder of My Sister's Care, an organization focused on improving gynecologic cancer awareness and care for medically underserved women and on eliminating health disparities. And she's a co-chair of the Advocacy Special Interest Group for the African Organization for Research and Training in Cancer, AORTIC. The recipient of the 2016 AACR Distinguished Public Service Award, Dicey is a member of NCI's Community Engagement in Genomics, a working group and the advocacy, director of advocacy and international engagement for the Globathon to end women's cancers. She is a fountain of idea, I would say the geyser of ideas at IGCS, and her community is so fortunate to have her take the lead in conceptualizing and developing IGCS's advocacy programs. She sees the big picture while having really intimate knowledge of the survivor patient needs. Congratulations on 25 years of amazing survivorship, Dicey, and for always leading by example. So you just heard Larry announce this, this terrific award. Thank you. What an amazing opportunity and a way to continue Dicey's legacy. So we are now ready to start the summit. Take a moment and read through a few technology tips before we begin. You can change your name to include your country so that as others scroll through the attendee screens, they will know what countries are represented and see the breadth of opportunities to connect. To change your name, hover over those your cursor over your image here, and you'll see these three little dots that will appear. If you click on those dots, you can click the rename, and then you can add your name and please add your country. So I'm from the country of Texas, as they keep trying to tell me. Okay, so great. To see the other attendees, hit the arrows to the right and left of your screen. Please remain unmuted throughout the summit unless you are asked to unmute. After you finish speaking, please mute yourself again. During the presentation, we encourage you to ask questions by typing them in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Speakers and others will address as many as possible during the Q&A segments. We built in plenty of time for questions, so don't be shy. I know sometimes you are, but sometimes you're not, and that's good. So we want to see it. If you want to learn more about any of the speakers or moderators today, you can review their bios on the IGCS website under Advocacy. This summit's being recorded, and a link will be posted in a few days. It'll be available also at the website, the IGCS website. And we'd be very happy if you would share screenshots, except for me, pictures and messages about the summit on social media, and use our hashtags, which is hashtag IGCS Advocacy Summit 2021, or hashtag Connected Empowered, or hashtag IGCS Advocacy. Now we'll move on to the first summit segment, moderated by Dr. Shankar, a radiation oncologist and distinguished IGCS award winner from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in India. Have a great summit. Dr. Shankar?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Coleman, for this encouraging words, and it's always great to hear you. So you lead us with the example as a president of IGCS. So welcome to the part one of this Gynecologic Cancer Literacy session. So this session will, next 45 minutes, you will hear this 4 amazing speakers. So each this is designed to enhance your understanding, knowledge of, and information on gynecological cancer. So if time permits, we will have the question answer session at the end. As Dr. Coleman has already stated, use the chat box to ask questions. So first speaker for this session is Bridget Hamster from United States of America, and she will talk about her survivorship story, and you can get an amazing insight from the story. So welcome to Dr. Hamster, and now it's over to you, and we are just waiting to hear from you.
What an honor to be here, and thank you for asking me to share stories and my story. First off, I am a 25-year multi-time breast cancer survivor. I started an organization about 25, almost 26 years ago, because I was diagnosed with breast cancer on my 35th birthday. So I was a very young woman. And through that, I met many women, and the organization I founded is called Sierra Sisters, African American Breast Cancer Organization. And I just want to fast forward to years later. Of course, many things happened during that time, and we don't have the time to share that. But I also became the co-founder of Icana, where Dr. Kimmy Dole, of course, dealing with endometrial cancer in the African American woman. These stories are so important. And so one of the stories I want to share as we talk about survivorship, of course, as a survivor, you turn and you pivot when you hear an incredible news about yourself. And so in that pivot, what I have done is wanted to create other survivors to find the empowerment within their self that they have, that they don't know that they have. So I want to share this first story about Bonnie. So Bonnie, the reason why I chose her picture, because she has an amazing face. To me, it almost looks angelic. Bonnie was a breast cancer survivor, and she was on her medical bed in the hospital dealing with treatment from stage 4 breast cancer. Bonnie immediately jumped into being a sister survivor and also wanted to make sure that other survivors had the opportunity to get information that they needed and the support that they needed. So we went to go pick Bonnie up from the hospital to get ready to bring her home and making sure that she was able to rest. Well, Bonnie said no. There was another sister that was in distress who needed to immediately go to the hospital. And Bonnie, in her slippers, in her hat, she says, no, I cannot go home. I'm a Sierra sisters. And so therefore we got to make sure this other sister gets to the hospital and that she's okay. So she refused to go home and lay down. We went and picked up this other sister who was in distress. Something was going on with her stomach, and we immediately picked her up. Bonnie said, no, this is what we do. This is what taking care of others is all about, because I take care of myself earlier. Now it's time to take care of this other sister. We picked up the sister up. She left her hospital bed. Bonnie, what a hero. And we took that other sister to the hospital. Had we had not gotten her to the hospital, she would have died that night. But because we have wonderful women like Bonnie and other sisters that decided to put whatever their health issues were on the back burner to put someone else first, will always remember Bonnie and the fact that she wanted to give someone else what she needed to have herself. For those of you that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, the heroes come in many, many, many different forms. And so sometimes you put on your cape while you're dealing with your own cancer issues to help someone else. Next slide. So as we talk about self-care, as survivors to caregivers, well, you just heard how a survivor is surviving their own disease and then moving on to be a caregiver, all in the same breath. And this happens many, many times. But I want to encourage all of you, there's a time that you want to make sure that you do that self-care. Why? Because self-care is the best care. So in my first picture that you see here, these are cancer survivors, many different types of cancer survivors that are letting their hair down. They're starting out their self-care on the dance floor. Why? Because sometimes you have got to let everything go and let your hair down, put on your best dress and move fast forward and get on that dance floor and forget about cancer altogether. So then, of course, you want to take some time and maybe you want to sit by the fire. Why? You want to reflect on the things that you have experienced. Then, of course, one of my favorites is the sister that's sitting in the bathtub with bubbles. I don't know what kind of drink she has, but I'm sure it's something that will tantalize her soul while she thinks about that self-care. What happens when you self-care? Then you have the ability to gear up. You've strengthened yourself. You loved yourself so that you can go back and give others the strength to love yourself back to health. So as I've been on this almost 26 years journey, and there's many different things that has happened, but time will not permit me to share that. I want to say that as a survivor, as a caregiver, make sure you step back, Take time to love yourself first so that you can give back to others. There is no way we could do this work if we don't stop and take care of ourselves. Love yourself back to health. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, for your moving story. And I think your perspective, which is very important, and it's so much of learning, listening to you. So it already sets the context for all other presentation. So next, we will hear from Dr. Robert Coleman, who will talk about the basics of gynecological cancer. So, Dr. Robert, please.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be with this group again. And I'm going to just quickly kind of go through the very, very high level of the basics of gynecologic cancer. We'll dig into some of the details throughout the rest of the session, and we'll address some of this in the Q&A. These are my disclosures. One of the things that I do is drug development, always hunting for better compounds for our patients, and I'm very passionate about the clinical research side of this, and you'll hear me say that a lot during this presentation. So I'm grateful to the companies that have engaged with us. So, in a very clinical way, this is a picture that I took out of a very famous medical atlas, the Netter Atlas. It basically just shows kind of the gynecologic cancers for the most part. We don't see the vulva here, not to discriminate against that, but that would be also considered part of the GYN oncology spectrum. So that's organs that that relate to the female genital tract. So it's vulva, vagina, cervix, which is a slower part of the uterus. You can see it, the uterine corpus itself, fallopian tubes, and the ovaries, which are right here. And so the tumors that involve this area are really kind of the core at what is gynecologic cancer. Now, it's in the United States, the most common cancer that we see that's newly diagnosed is those that relate to the uterine corpus, which is the top part of that uterus. But we know that if you look at the GYN cancers overall, you can see that each of these little components I just mentioned do contribute, with uterus being the most common newly diagnosed cancer. And one thing that gets, I think, lost in these statistics, and something that we as practitioners feel very much every day, is the prevalence of this disease. And so although these are very hardcore statistics, raw numbers, what's in the clinic and what we see in society are the actual, not only newly diagnosed patients, but the survivors. And so that contribution of the patients that are newly diagnosed aligned with those patients that are surviving form what we call the body, or the prevalent body of these diseases. And what we've seen in recent years, although we still struggle to completely eliminate these cancers, is that all of them are now being represented by women that are living longer with that diagnosis. And so what's happening is that the pool of patients is actually increasing because patients are living longer. So we're very excited about that, and that's come from hard work on all fronts, from advocacy all the way through in-stage care. So we are super excited about that. It's providing us a better opportunity to impact the lives of our patients. Now, the diagnosis of these diseases are variable around the world, and you'll see that in women that breast cancer still is the #1 global disease, followed closely by colorectal cancer and cervix cancer, which might surprise some people. But if you look at this from the standpoint of where there are active programs for prevention and screening, which we can see in most highly developed systems with mature healthcare systems that focus on this, cervical cancer is actually very low in the list of those afflictions of women. But it is very high in the list. You can see almost as high as breast cancer in countries that that struggle with this. And so there are these global disparities, and of course we focus on cervix cancer because it is probably the most preventable disease that we have globally with vaccination. And so we're starting to see the very early signs of what vaccination can do to eradicate this disease, which I sincerely hope we can do in my lifetime. Now, when we look at some of these diseases, we tend to clinically talk about them with respect to where they are at the point of diagnosis. And so what you're looking at here are the stages or the locations of where these diseases are at diagnosis, and what our long-term outcomes are based on that. And so I think just generally what you can see is that in most cases, for instance, in uterine cancer, patients are diagnosed with localized disease. And this comes from a lot of different components, many of which are related to the fact that symptomatology for uterine cancer is postmenopausal bleeding or abnormal uterine bleeding. That usually alerts the patient that there's something wrong. They'll get to medical care, it gets evaluated, and fortunately that symptom is related to an earlier stage or a localized state of disease. And with that is also the highest survivorship outcomes. So, and you can see that as the disease becomes distant, the survivorship decreases. This is a common feature that we see, but it's also very disease specific. So you can see with cervix cancer, by the time the diagnosis is made, many patients have regionalized or even distant disease where survivorship is more difficult. And that's even emphasized further with ovarian cancer, where the signs and symptoms of early stage disease are not present. We don't have an effective screening tool. And because of that, many and most of our patients, the majority of our patients, are actually diagnosed with metastatic disease, where the survivorship is the worst. So balancing these kind of factors and observing are the lessons that we've learned from, for instance, the impact of early diagnosis, the impact of screening, and most importantly, the impact of prevention really can have on the gynecologic cancers. So the question I get frequently is, why did this happen to me? And it's a really good question. I mean, I wish we knew the answer to it. It seems like it's so serendipitous. But in reality, you know, there are, what we do know about cancer is that cancer is a, quote, genetic disease. We know that what happens when a normal cell becomes a cancer cell, things got screwed up. So inside of that cell's nucleus and the inside of the cell cytoplasm, a number of factors have gone haywire, and the control mechanisms were either superseded or they became silented. And so these, in that way, you can kind of consider them as genetic. But what we understand is that there are many factors that can induce those changes. And many of them can be environmental, they can be personal, and they can be molecular at the cellular level. And I've just kind of shown some of the things that we understand. So HPV infection, we know, is related to multiple different diseases. Cervix cancer and head and neck cancer are probably the two most visible of these this particular infection. This is also one of the reasons why cervix cancer can be so completely preventable, because we can ward off this infection so that this would never start. And so again, this is part of the global effort to eradicate cervix cancer by HPV vaccination. Uterine cancer, we know there are multiple different components, and interestingly, they are not unique. I mean, not unique to this disease. So although obesity can be very commonly seen in certain types of endometrial cancer, there are uterine cancers that are not associated with obesity and may be more associated with this p53 mutation and frequently have this microsatellite instability, again, providing an opportunity in this particular disease for therapeutic intervention. And ovarian cancer, we now know, is almost always characterized by a p53 mutation, but there are other components that can lead to the development of that disease. So when we put this kind of all together, there's this circle of carcinogenesis that has been added to over the years. So Doug Hanahan wrote a paper in Cell in 2001 that basically showed this same curve, but with only 7 components on the wheel. Now it's increased to 10, and it continues to increase further. But what you can see is that these are the factors that cause that cell to escape the normal regulatory mechanisms and cause it to go into a state that would be representative of the cancer process. So this is evading growth suppressors, avoiding immune destruction, enabling replicative immortality, tumor suppression or promotion, inflammation, activation of metastasis and angiogenesis, and so on. And the good news with all of this, as we've characterized them, is that we have started to come up with responses to it. So these particular drugs now are being developed to target these components individually and in combination to try to block this cancer process. Now, within our ovarian cancer world, two major additions to our armamentarium have been recently explored and have proven to be successful. Those are anti-angiogenesis, so that's blocking off new blood vessels, and those that block this ability of the cell to repair a single-strand DNA defect called PARP inhibition. These two agents now have now combined to provide 9 different approvals in the last 7 years. So it's been a tremendous, these PARP inhibitors have been a tremendous impact on both primary and recurrent disease in ovarian cancer. And they add to the 3 indications that we already have with bevacizumab in the anti-angiogenesis sphere. And most recently, and this is just, this is very recently, all of these are new drugs in the last year. So Pembrolizumab was initially approved in cervical cancer a couple years ago, but it got its full approval just recently. Tisotumab vedotin is another a drug that was newly diagnosed in cervical cancer on September 20th. And then we have Pembrolizumab being approved in combination with chemotherapy in frontline on October 13th. So 3 approvals in cervical cancer in the last couple months. We also have the immune-based therapy in patients that have both tumor mutational burden high and MSI high status in endometrial cancer. Then earlier this year, we had the approval, or the summer, the approval of Pembrol and lenvatinib in patients with recurrent endometrial cancer. And then we had the second PD-1 inhibitor, dostarlimab, which was approved in patients with cervical cancer, in endometrial cancer. So all of these approvals in a year, can you believe it? So this is what the hard work of my colleagues and friends have done on a global scale to try to bring disease, to try to treat these diseases some new life. Now, just briefly before I close, I just want to talk a little bit about the process. So how do we get what I just mentioned? How do we get those results? So it is a very organized and strategic process of taking discovery and getting them into patients to prove their efficacy. I wish that I could say that everything that started here ended up here. Most of the time, it doesn't happen. But if we don't go through this process of identifying the activity of these agents, the safety, the efficacy in the disease, and comparing it against a known standard, we never get new things into the clinic. So this is the process through clinical trials that lead to the new, that bring the discoveries from the lab into the clinic. And what we hope for are things like this, where we have a study that was launched that was testing a hypothesis, in this case, whether or not olaparib, which is a PARP inhibitor, could be added to bevacizumab in patients with ovarian cancer as a maintenance therapy after their chemotherapy. So they started, all the patients started here at this left point, and you can see that in this study, based on their coming onto the combination arm, led to a substantial improvement over what was considered a standard of care. This is a phase 3 study that was comparing a experimental combination versus a standard of care, and it won, and it's approved. And now we have the opportunity to bring this to patients. So the one thing I want to leave you with, one educational component, is how do you interpret this curve? So the way that we do this is that we look at the probability of whatever it is that we're looking for. Let's say it's progression-free survival. So progression, and over time. And what we do is we look at one treatment over time, and you can see that as time goes on, the treatment is not working in a proportion of patients. And if we get on a different armamentherapy that we've compared, and it shows that it extends it out, this difference between the two curves becomes the magnitude of benefit. And so what we're looking for is an improvement in this magnitude of benefit, sometimes referred to as the median, but more importantly is referred to as a hazard ratio. And this can lead to important improvements in understanding whether or not a drug is beneficial. So in general, GYN cancers are generally low in incidence, but they have high prevalence. And this is growing because we are evaluating and proving new therapies to enter into the clinical domain. Look how many new diseases new drugs we have in just 1 year. I mean, it's just amazing. I spent 8 years from 2004 or 2006 until 2014 with nothing new. So this is awesome. Thank God we are being able to do this. So as we understand the biology, we have the opportunity to change the natural history. And remember, as always, you'll hear it from me in every presentation, is that research cures cancer. And so we need your mind and your participation to be able to achieve these goals. With that, I'll close. Thank you so much. This is one of my favorite slides of the Where's Waldo, if you've ever looked at those books. It's a little bit easier in the social distancing edition. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, for this excellent presentation, which was information-packed. And I think you simplified the basics of gynecological cancers in the best way. And I think it will be very helpful for all the participants who are attending it. So now moving to the next speaker, she is Daniela Luvero. She is a gynecologist and member of IGCS Council, and she's also council licensed for advocacy. She will cover screening options in gynecological cancer. She has not joined us, live today, but she has recorded her presentation. So I will request to please play her recording.
Good morning and good afternoon to all virtual attendees from all over the world. It's a great pleasure for me to be virtually here with you. My name is Daniela Luvero and I'm a gynecologist oncologist at the University Campus Biomedico in Rome. First of all, I would thank Daisy for her empowerment in the organization of this exciting summit. This is my disclosure. So here, a quick background about the onset of the cancer. We can divide the cancer in hereditary cancer, may occur when a gene with a mutation is passed down in the family from parent to child. Familial cancer, likely caused by a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Sporadic cancer occurs by chance. So people with sporadic cancer typically do not have relatives with the same type of cancer. A significant proportion of gynecological cancer have a hereditary component. With breast cancer, the 24% with ovarian cancer and the 90% of patients with endometrial cancer have a genetic mutation. So as we know, a genetic testing in routine clinical practice and a correct genetic counseling is really important at any point of the diagnostic pathway. So it's really, really important. Before surgery, for primary cancer risk, with the surveillance and the screening, a diagnosis to inform about the surgical treatment plan and for a secondary cancer management. And post-surgery, to choose the best potential treatment option for our patients. Anyway, at any time, it represents a really benefit and prevention for family members. For these reasons, all oncology societies recommend testing all women with ovarian cancer for BRCA1 and 2 mutations, regardless the age or family history. But the key point is the BRCA test enough for our patients? So do we risk losing some high-risk patients? So hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome has historically been focused on BRCA1 and BRCA2, the first genes identified where there was a clear increased risk demonstrated for breast and ovarian cancer. Today, we know that within the syndrome, there are actually several genes associated with the cancer, with the risk of cancer. So we are no longer just thinking about BRCA1 and BRCA2. As the Cancer Genome Atlas shows, as we know here, mutation in ovarian cancer can be different. A total of 70 patients may have the possibility to have an alteration in the HRD, so in the homologous recombinations pathway, including HR deficiency, proficiency, and possible HR deficiency like 10 homozygosis loss. It has long been suspected, and now data has emerged showing that within hereditary breast ovarian syndrome, there are actually several genes associated with an increased risk for breast cancer, and likewise with ovarian cancer. In fact, we have also learned that a single gene can be associated with multiple cancer risk, and multiple genes can be associated with increased risk of a single cancer or syndrome. Thanks to the technological advances in molecular diagnostics, we now have the ability to actually test from multiple genes that make up some of these other genes outside the BRCA1 and 2. For this reason, over twice as many patients with genetic mutation would be identified by using a hereditary cancer panel approach. If the indication of the BRCA test is shared by all society, the indication to a multi-gene test is more confused. The NCCN said there is a role for multi-gene testing in people who have tested negative for a single syndrome, but whose personal or family history remains strongly suggestive of genetic predisposition. So it's really important. Unfortunately, a large variability exists worldwide, and patient access to testing is limited between countries. A call to action was requested to harmonize guidelines and implemented the standard risk assessment protocols. We created a standardized protocol in our clinic in Italy, started with the knowledge of current pathways used, so the revision of existing tools already utilized, the identification of opportunities with the aim to develop new tools, the collection of data to test the protocol, and make the adjustment as necessary during the path. Many figures works together for patients' benefit. In fact, standardize a protocol and testing all women with epithelial ovarian cancer is important because screening on the basis of family history or age may miss a significant percentage of patients with BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutation. In fact, data have shown that women with BRCA-mutated ovarian cancer, up to 47% have no relevant family history of ovarian or breast cancer. Up to 71% of patients are 15 years of age or older at diagnosis, and 32% of patients are older than 60. In our center, supported by Myriad Genetics, we planned a project in which patients were referred to a specific therapeutic diagnostic path. Firstly, a patient who had received a diagnosis of endometrial, ovarian, or breast cancer fill a questionnaire about his personal and family history. Then the gynecologist or oncologist discussed with patients about the possibility to have the test regarding a possible mutation. Then we have checked if patients met clinical criteria for germline testing, and we proposed to patients or BRCA test or a multi-gene panel test. Patients could decide to undergo to the test or not. If not, we choose the therapy and the process stopped. If agreed, patients sign an informed consent and the oncology nurse collected the blood sample or saliva. Then we send the test to a laboratory external to our clinic in Padua. In 2-3 weeks' time, we receive the results and we contact the patient for an appointment to discuss the results, treatment plan, or to need to have a genetic counseling. This is the questionnaire for patients, including personal and family history, in order to decide if patients was fit for test. we decided to offer the multi-gene test in collaboration with media to all patients with negative BRCA genes, but personal or family history strongly suggestive of hereditary mutations. All patients with an early onset of tumor, so age less than 40 years, even if single test was negative, and patients with synchronous tumor, so in example, ovarian and endometrial cancer, both. We actually have 103 patients tested in 13 months. 30 patients with BRCA mutated, 23 patients with a VUS, so with a variant insignificant, and for different genes, so MSH3, CDH1, etc., and 67 patients were negative. Finally, we found a small prenoplastic neoplasia in the stomach by gastroscopy in a patient with an insignificant variant for STK11 gene, one in situ breast carcinoma after prophylactic mastectomy due to BRCA1 positive a genetic test, and one rectal cancer on polypus in patient with a mutation with endometrial cancer. In addition, after genetic counseling in 30 patients with BRCA positive, 3 daughters of them were BRCA2 mutated. So it's really important for the family. In summary, to achieve a best clinical management in gynecological cancer patients, we need to improve the knowledge of molecular cancer profile and the patient selection for test. By testing all patients at the diagnosis, focusing on the patients and family history, increasing the BRCA test and multi-gen test, choosing a validated and quality test, reducing the time for having test results with the aim to correctly prevent and assess the patients, offering the best possible therapy as soon as possible. We need, of course, to standardize these care pathways for risk assessment and testing in patients with gynecological cancer in order to optimize the treatment pattern. In conclusion, a significant proportion of ovarian cancer have a hereditary component, and the clinical implications of genetic testing in ovarian cancer have gained in significance, not only for surveillance and surgical prevention, but also for therapeutic decision-making in terms of choosing the standard target therapy for our patients. Testing all women at diagnosis is important not only for preventive implication, but also for the family risk assessment. Moreover, we have a unique opportunity to work in specific countries and pilot educational interventions based on needs assessment. Partnership will be the key, and the ability to apply this intervention to other parts of the world where inequities exist, unfortunately. So this collaborative work might applicate in underserved areas to improve the diagnostic pathways and patients' outcome. And IGCS is moving on this way with a new pathway project to ensure the access to genetic testing and genetic counseling to the other countries worldwide. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Daniela, for this presentation. And you nicely covered, I think, genetic determinants of gynecological cancer, along with molecular prevention in gynecological cancer. This is, I think, need of the time. So our last presenter for this session is Cornelia Asante. So she will share information on patient right and related subjects. So please share your screen. You're welcome to speak now.
Good afternoon from Johannesburg, South Africa. My name is Cornelia Asante. I'll be looking at patients' rights, options, and duties. The current patients' rights movement originated in Nazi Germany after the Nazis had used scientists and doctors to help them conduct horrific experiments on humans without the people being studied permission or consent. The studies were being done to test drugs and treatments. And at the end of the war, when we had the Nuremberg trials, there was a component of quote unquote Nuremberg trials for medicine. And that resulted in 1947, the adoption of the Nuremberg Code, which created the genesis for the human rights of research participants, as well as for our modern doctrine of informed consent. The Nuremberg Code also set ethical standards for research in humans, which are used all over the world. Then came a whole movement that was inspired by the civil rights movement and all other rights movements, the feminist movement. There in the 60s, grassroots consumer organizations, particularly the National Welfare Rights Organization, started to talk about patients' rights and about the concept of a Bill of Patients' Rights. The initial focus of this movement was in the United States, and at first it started with rights in medical care and in the clinical context. So that was in the 60s at the height of those rights movements. In the mid-1990s, the right to medical care became an issue. We then have the modern idea of equitable access to health for all who need it. This new movement was in line with the health and human rights language that was very interestingly started by the WHO Constitution. WHO is World Health Organization. We get into bad habits of using acronyms. In 1946. Then we were blessed in 1964 as part of this rights movement by the Declaration of Helsinki, which was started by the World Medical Association, and it is currently the cornerstone of all research ethics globally. I looked at various countries' notions of patients' rights, and I'm very pleased to share that the movement for patients' rights, whereas it started originally around Helsinki and the United States in the 60s, it has gained global force. The 7 core rights, some countries like India have like 17 patients' rights, but from what I deduced, these 7 rights are universal to most of the world countries that have patient rights bills. The right to be treated with respect, the right to obtain your medical records. A lot of us who've been patients know how difficult it is in some jurisdictions to obtain your medical records. So from now on, I want my colleagues to know that they have that right in law. And the right to privacy of your medical records. In the US, you have the HIPAA Act, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, which protects patients' sensitive information. And then we have the right to make a treatment choice, whereas in some countries, people are still subjected to treatments without much participation. There is this right to say, I will avail of this treatment and I don't want treatment B. And of course, the right to informed consent, the right to refuse treatment, which pairs very nicely with the right to make a treatment choice. And then finally, but not least, the right to make medical decisions about end of life. I looked at a comparison because I thought, sometimes when you talk about rights, we don't realize that the developing world has, in some instances, rights discourses that are much more advanced than the developed world. In my country, South Africa, the right not to be subjected to medical treatment and scientific experiments without consent is a constitutional right. It's part of the right not to be subjected to cruel and demeaning treatment. And then I also looked at our National Health Act, of 2003, which emphasizes that users must have full knowledge of their treatment. the benefits, the side effects, the cost, and any other fallouts that might happen because of the treatment. Also, Section 7 of our National Health Act gives the right to informed consent, and Section 8 talks about participation in decision-making. So you can see that these rights are not just lawyers speak, they actually do have expression in national laws, like South Africa, the United States, India, Australia, you name it. They have the rights speak, or the rights of medical patients. Of course, rights come with responsibilities and duties. So what are the patient's responsibilities? We have to be responsible for our own health. We have to provide information about our health so that proper diagnosis can be made. We have to be financially and administratively responsible. In other places, patients cannot afford their own medical care. This is where nation states would have the obligation to make sure that people access the healthcare they need from a universal health coverage perspective. Also, we have the right, we have to respect, the rights of other patients, and more especially the rights of health professionals. I think this one is very important when we look at people, anti-vaxxers, attacking medical professionals because they don't want mask mandates, they don't want to vaccinate. We need to remind them as forcibly as we can that there is this obligation to look after the rights of health professionals as well. And then also, people must not abuse the healthcare system, use it properly so that others can benefit from you from a public health perspective. And then we have the duty to comply with prescribed treatment. Your treatment won't work unless you don't listen to your doctor. But sometimes you have side effects that are very severe. This is an opportunity to talk to your medical team and say, I am not processing this treatment well. Can we relook what I'm being given? And then, of course, we have the right to look after medical records in our possession. I laughed when I saw this one because I know how difficult it is for patients to obtain medical records. There's still this tendency to think only doctors or the medical system can look after records. But studies here have shown that when patients have their records, they keep them even safer than the health systems do. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Cornelia, for this very, very interesting presentation. And I think we all talk about patient treatment, and many of the times in low and middle income country, everyone talk about the patient rights, but it is very, very important to talk about healthcare professional rights. And many of the incidences, during the COVID time, where we have disparity between the, access to the system and, the demand and the supply of the healthcare. So it's very important, and thank you for this insightful lecture. So we have talked about the women cancer. So apart from the many gynecological cancer, we stay updated on the breast cancer. So we have time now. This is the time for question and answers from the expert after this 4 important presentation from the different experts and the survivors. So if anybody, because I have just checked my chat box, there is no questions. So probably I will congratulate all the speakers for such clarity that nobody is having any question in their mind. So if no one is having question, probably I will take this responsibility to ask this question, because this is a very, the forum I can see faces from different part of the world. So, WHO has talked about Eliminate Cervical Cancer program. So I have heard it, I have read about it. Probably I would like to, ask this question to President IGCS, that what is the strategy IGCS has taken in next 2 or 3 years to deal with this issue, especially in reference to low and middle income countries? Because as you have rightly said, the comparison between the cervical cancer cases in developing nations and developed nations. So please, sir, I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Boy, I love the platform to be able to talk about it. I think IGCS, is actually one of the few organizations that can address this because of our global reach. We are structured to provide representation globally. That's our structure. Our council is devised from representatives from all over the world, and each of them provide input on the specific needs of those regions. So while cervix cancer is a global issue, it is differentially impacting countries without adequate screening, early detection, and then ultimately with treatment. I think our strongest component is our alliance with WHO's, the World Health Organization's strategy to increase not only education, but also the opportunity for pre-invasive disease management and counseling. And so we are working essentially with our providers in those areas to understand what the gaps are, to provide education, which is what we do best with our subject matter experts, and to bring voice from those regions to the global community. So it's our connectivity with the rest of the world that IGCS, I think, is a perfect pillar for doing that. So it's a long game. We're definitely playing the long game here. As you know, the time frame from diagnosis of pre-invasive disease to invasive disease is long, and provides us an opportunity to intervene and actually lead to life-changing outcomes with prevention of this disease. But this also comes with the form of vaccination. So the education around vaccination and the effort from the WHO to help improve vaccination globally, to make it affordable and available and not in a fearful environment, is part of what IGCS is doing in its educational outreach. So we're early in this process, but I think we've embraced the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility, to be able to interact with these communities where cervix cancer is so endemic, and the opportunity to change the natural history of this disease there. So there'll be a lot more to come as we continue to work on this with our partners around the world. Thank you for the question.
So final question related to vaccination, because in India, it's 1/6 of the world population also harbor 1/5 of the total burden of the cervical cancer. And we all know that it's a preventable and it's a vaccine preventable disease. But the majority of the low and middle income countries struggle with the cost of the vaccine. And if you try to, there are approaches which has tried to procure it through Gavi, through UNICEF. So cost of the vaccine suddenly comes down by 1/5. So if IGCS can take up such kind of approaches to help organization, the government, the federal government, many state government, to work with the cost of the vaccine, probably it will be a big step, because going through Gavi and UNICEF takes lots of time, and it needs lots of logistic issues. So I have seen in India, because suppose if somebody buys it over the counter, it costs them from $25 to $30. And through UNICEF or Gavi, they procure it in $5. So it makes difference. So I think if this kind of approach can be taken at global level, probably many of the middle and lower middle income country will look to IGCS for such kind of assistance.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple of very, very important points. So I look at vaccination for cervix cancer as we should with any other childhood disease. It should be part of the natural process that we would go through to prevent cancer. I think the issue is that we don't understand or appreciate the burden that this places on the sustainability of the population by not having this as part of routine management or routine care, healthcare. everybody deserves this opportunity. And I do believe that. I think you're exactly right. If it is a struggle, there are a lot of there's a lot of perceptions that we need to overcome. But you're right. If we can come to a point where we can make this as affordable as we do with any other childhood illness, we will win.
Okay, so somebody has charged up with our discussion, and somebody has asked one question: is genetic testing standard for gynecological cancer? And I will request Dr. Armstrong to answer this question. Is not present. So, Dr. Armstrong.
Thanks very much. Yes, since Dr. Labora is not able to be on the call after her wonderful presentation, the question is whether genetic testing is standard of care in gynecologic cancers. And I can answer for you in the United States. It actually depends on the gynecologic cancer. For ovarian, fallopian tube, peritoneal cancers in the United States, it is recommended that all women have genetic testing. This is even more critical now because of how important genetic test results are in predicting the benefits of some of our therapies, as Dr. Coleman pointed out, PARP inhibitors. So everybody in the United States is recommended to have germline genetic testing. Tumor testing is additionally provides us with lots of information in ovarian cancer and in other types of cancers, other gynecologic cancers, such as endometrial cancer, and maybe to a lesser extent in ovarian cancer. We started to have a little bit of an overlap between what we consider standard pathology and genetic testing. And this is particularly true in cervical cancer, where things like PD-L1, which are markers for response to immunotherapy, are done both as part of genomic tumor testing and as part of standard pathology. I realize also that outside the United States, breast cancer is considered a gynecologic cancer. And in the United States, we have guidelines for who should get genetic testing with breast cancer. And I think most people agree that any woman who has breast cancer is under the age of 50, and women with triple negative breast cancer should have genetic testing. Interestingly, outside of the United States, I've done some work in the Middle East and North African countries in terms of the epidemiology of breast cancer, and it's very different than it is in the United States. The median age is just under 50, and so you could argue that outside of the United States, particularly in areas where breast cancer incidence is high in younger women, that genetic testing really should be done in a lot more women with breast cancer. The same issues that come up with cost, though, as you talked about with HPV, are issues with genetic testing, and we're really talking about several manyfold higher costs. They have gone down from when I started doing genetic counseling of over $4,000 for genetic testing to $250 for a good quality and reliable genetic test that can be available at least in the United States. But that's still a lot of money. And so we certainly think that there are some gynecologic cancers for which genetic testing is really critical. Some endometrial cancers where there's a suspicion for Lynch syndrome, all ovarian cancers, and a substantial portion of women with breast cancer.
Rightly pointed out, I think biology of breast cancer, especially in United Arab Emirates, you see more of the inflammatory breast cancer. In India also, you see the occurrence of breast cancer 1 decade earlier. Now we can see more number of triple negative breast cancer cases, and as we know, it's very aggressive. So now it's more of standard of care to offer genetic testing if somebody is a triple negative breast cancer. So thank you for this clarification. Very nicely explained. Thank you so much. So this is now end of the session. So thank you once again for this wonderful presentation. So I will turn this over to Miriam Mutabi. So Miriam, please carry on.
Hello once again, everyone. I think you're like me, just having listened to the amazing presentations and really having a lot of knowledge. I think at this point in time, we would like to identify the person who's the most recently diagnosed cancer survivor. And so I'll ask a couple of questions to help us identify our winner. If the question applies to you, and you want us to recognize you, either raise your hand, turn on your video and raise your hand so that we can see you, or if you don't feel comfortable turning on your video or turning on your camera, you can use the raise your hand feature, which if you go to the bottom of the screen where you have your audio and the video, under reactions, you can click the raise hand function. Okay, so we're going to start, and we'll probably give you a little, maybe about 10 seconds with each, but I would want to know, was anyone here diagnosed less than 2 years ago? If you could kindly raise your hand. I'm trying to scroll through my video. Let's see.
I'm helping Miriam. I don't see anyone yet. No.
Okay. What about 18 months ago?
We might need to go the other way. See if it's
I know,
3 years.
I know. let's probably switch gears and recognize perhaps the oldest cancer survivor. And so we could, there's nobody at 2 years. Was anyone diagnosed 3 years ago?
Nope. There's Colleen, yes.
Okay. Was anyone diagnosed more than 5 years ago?
Nifa?
Yes, I
And
think
Donna?
necessary for it. Correct.
All right. What about 10 years ago?
Still have a few.
Okay. 15 years ago?
We still have 3.
Okay. 20 years ago?
I think we have a winner. Donna? Right? And anyone else?
Donna, you said, Susan?
Yes, Donna Pepin.
Okay, excellent. So we still have one hand raised, that of Donna, who's going to receive the lovely soapstone heart paperweight. I don't know if Susan, we can show it on the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
She's receiving
There we go.
a paperweight. Yeah. So Donna, congratulations! You are the recipient of this lovely soapstone paperweight, which can also be used as a calming tool when you rub its smooth surface. You'll also receive a lovely keepsake box created by an Aboriginal artist in Australia, and both are really, really lovely. I think part of the whole point behind this summit is our sense of community, and basically we want to celebrate you. Perhaps we could do that very quickly by asking everyone to go to their screens. We can't clap virtually, but if you're able to raise your hand and just acknowledge Donna. If we can just do that in the next few minutes, the next few seconds. Everyone, please raise a hand to Donna. Awesome, awesome. So Donna, I don't know if you want to share a little about where you're from, your cancer site, and when you were diagnosed.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. This is like kind of
Hey, Donna.
big, hi. I didn't expect any of this today, and that's a lovely gift. Thank you. I was diagnosed in 2006 in Vancouver, Canada, at the BC Cancer Agency. and treated very well, I might add. And they're doing some amazing research for ovarian cancer there. Some of you may be aware of the OVCAN team as researchers, or the OVCAN project in Canada. Following my diagnosis, I actually was very healthy and lived cancer-free for 9 years. And I was diagnosed with a recurrence of my disease, unfortunately, in 2016. I currently am treated at the Princess Margaret Cancer Centre in Toronto, and I feel extremely fortunate to be there in terms of the quality of care that I have. And I am also involved in advocacy with Ovarian Cancer Canada, and am a patient advocate or patient advisor to the OVCAN Governing Council, as well as a co-lead of the Patient Partners in Research for the OVCAN Research Project. So I see a couple of my colleagues are here today, Colleen Chachuk, as well as Ann Chase, I see on the list. So, and I think that Ann is actually a 20-something year survivor. I didn't know why she didn't throw her hat into the ring. Anyway, I've taken up enough time. It's very lovely, and I'm happy to be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. I think, and thank you for sharing your story with us. We celebrate you. I think we all acknowledge your journey. I think if there's one take-home message that you would like to share with the group, what would that be?
I would say that I believe very strongly that my advocacy work, I have been speaking out for my disease for 15 years. I believe that my work in advocacy allows me to live my life to the fullest. To do work of this value is very inspiring. And as a famous Canadian once said, Mr. Gord Downey, our highest power is helping others. And so to work for the greater good for ovarian cancer patients in Canada is my absolute honor.
Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you for those very inspiring words. As you said, our greatest strengths are in service to others. So thank you so much, Donna. We celebrate you. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so for the next panel on gynae cancer literacy, part 2, Dr. Shankar will again moderate. Dr. Shankar, please proceed.
Probably after serving the starter, we are ready with the main course, and we'll be calling it Gynecological Cancer Literacy Part 2. Hope you people have enjoyed the Part 1 of Gynecological Cancer Literacy. So we will have 3 presentations in Part 2, and hope this presentation based on the gynecological cancer, survivor experience and other, genetic aspects will enrich you more scientific understanding of this gynecological cancer. So first, I would like to call to speak is Nefa Tarimore, who will share her, survivor story with us. So, More, please, stage is all yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nefa Tarimore. Thanks for having me here today to share my story on gynecologic cancer. So that's what I'll be doing, and also talking about where I am today in terms of the diagnosis and the work that I'm doing. So I was, for the first time, I was diagnosed in 2013 with uterine cancer. I was age 33 at the time. I had experienced heavy bleeding and severe lower back pain, which led me to, to a trip to the emergency room. I wasn't diagnosed at that point, but I was, seen and had an ultrasound, which showed that I was bleeding. And they referred me to an outside GYN specialist, who then had me go in to have a DNC. And I received the results maybe about 3 to 5 days later after having it. And it revealed that I had an early stage uterine cancer. I was devastated. I had just gotten married 5 months prior to my diagnosis. And it was supposed to have been a happy time for me, and it just really wasn't at that point. So I received treatment. Treatment worked for maybe about 9 months, and then I had a biopsy. So on my third biopsy, in fact, I had found out I had a recurrence of uterine cancer, and I was 35 at that time. So I had a hysterectomy, and then during the hysterectomy, only my uterus was removed, and I was left with the fallopian tubes and ovaries, both ovaries. So in 2018, at the age of 38, in fact, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and I had genetics testing, which came back that I do have a genetic mutation called Lynch Syndrome. And, I received 6 rounds of chemo, and I finished my last round July 6th of 2018. And then from there, I found an organization called SHARE. I attended their support groups, and that's how I got involved in outreach. I'm involved in SHARE's outreach program, going in the Black communities or African American communities and offering information on gynecologic cancers and pretty much all the cancers that SHARE serves. And also today, I'm doing pretty well with my diagnosis. I'm no evidence of disease. And I'm working at SHARE as the uterine program coordinator and outreach coordinator. I facilitate all of SHARE's uterine cancer support groups. And also I manage the helpline that we have. And I'm just involved in a lot of the advocacy work surrounding uterine cancer and, GYN cancers. I'm also a part of a new campaign that, just recently started this year called Spot Her. And it's that's through an organization called ASIDE. And it is to raise awareness surrounding uterine cancer to those women that we love or that we know, and families. So, through all my diagnosis, I didn't, let it take away from my life. I'm living my life to the fullest. I'm happy, and and that's my story. And I want to say thank you all for having me here and listening.
Thank you, Nicola, for this enlightening and inspirational story. And it's so great to hear the perspective of survivors in their own words. It's really great. And I think you are the people who really inspire us in our day-to-day practice. And I give credit to all the cancer patients for making a doctor more human in their life. And especially you work in the cancer care. So, when I see you people, probably we all make you and cry in our life for small thing. But when this story we hear, probably you motivate us to, not to make you and cry at our office places and to learn, great thing from you people. So thank you once again for this story. So our next presenter is Dr. Armstrong. So we have just heard her. So she's an oncologist at Johns Hopkins University, and she will cover the most sensational and important aspects of, gynecological and breast cancer care, which is driving the cancer care in very different direction. And everybody is talking about this link with the genetics, how genetics is playing the role. And thanks to Angelina Jolie, who added so much of fuel to this discussion. Initially, I thought I will call Angelina Jolie mother of, genetic and all, but, for a male, it's so difficult to call Angelina Jolie a mother. So I thought I will call her Lady of Cancer, cancer genetics. So next to you, ma'am. So please carry on with your presentation.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me. So I was asked to talk about the breast cancer link between the genetics of breast and gynecologic cancer. And just because of time, I'm really going to be focusing on breast and ovarian cancer. But as we heard from, very movingly from Neftari, there are links between other gynecologic cancers, particularly with Lynch syndrome. So we're going to start about talking about the genetics of breast cancer and what we know about breast cancer. If we look at most of the risk factors, they're usually related to reproductive or hormonal issues. It is a disease of aging, at least in the United States. But early menarche, starting your menses early, going through late menopause, hormone replacement therapy in menopause, decreased number of children, late number, first pregnancy at a later age, decreased breastfeeding. But except for family history, all of these are fairly modest risk factors. If we look at family history in breast cancer, what we know is if a woman has a first-degree relative, so that will be a family member that she's directly related to, so that's going to be a mother, sister, or sometimes a daughter. And if they have a first-degree relative with breast cancer, particularly who is young, who had a premenopausal diagnosis, their relative risk, lifetime risk of breast cancer is threefold elevated. If their relative had bilateral disease, so had cancer in both breasts, that person's risk is fivefold elevated. And if they are unlucky enough to have a first-degree relative who had both premenopausal and bilateral disease, their risk is ninefold elevated. However, if grandma had, breast cancer at 65 postmenopausal, that's less likely to be familial, and their risk is only slightly elevated compared to the general population. The two genes that really have been the big focus with breast cancer, and we'll see in ovarian cancer, are BRCA1 and BRCA2. And BRCA1 is a tumor suppressor gene on chromosome 17. And there are now literally thousands of mutations that have been identified. What we know with BRCA1 is that the lifetime risk of breast cancer is 50 to 85%. And that's a striking elevation compared to the general population risk, at least in the United States, of about 12%. And this is often early age at onset. Many of these women will also be at risk for having a second primary breast cancer, up to 40 to 60%. So when they are addressing their treatment for their initial breast cancer, many women will choose to have bilateral mastectomy because of their concerns about this second primary breast cancer. And the ovarian cancer risk is between 15 and 45%. And again, that's a significant elevation compared to the general population risk in the United States of 1 to 2%. There also can be some other cancers that are associated with this, such as prostate and pancreas cancer. Similarly, BRCA2 is a tumor suppressor gene, and again, many different mutations identified throughout the gene. BRCA2 is also associated with an increased risk of breast cancer, but is somewhat unique in that the incidence of male breast cancer is quite high, 6%. In the United States, less than 1 in 100 cases of breast cancer are in men. Men who do have breast tissue and it can develop cancer, and men with the BRCA2 mutation have a much higher risk of that. Ovarian cancer is also elevated in women with a BRCA2 mutation, but you can see it's not as high a risk as it is in women with a BRCA1 mutation. And also it tends to be a little bit later onset in life. BRCA2 is also associated with a smattering of other cancers, particularly melanoma and pancreas cancer and prostate cancer, but they are a somewhat lesser magnitude. So what are the things that would be a red flag for us of a BRCA mutation when there's multiple cases of early onset breast cancer, when there's ovarian cancer with a family history of breast or ovarian cancer, if there's breast and ovarian cancer in the same woman, bilateral breast cancer? If in the United States, the women of Ashkenazi Jewish inheritance have a higher risk of BRCA mutations, and male breast cancer. What we know about the epidemiology of BRCA1 and 2, in the United States, about 1 in 400 non-Ashkenazi Caucasian women will have a BRCA mutation. And there are specific founder mutations in many populations. In the United States, the best defined is the Ashkenazi or Eastern European Jewish population, where about 2% of individuals, regardless of family history, have a BRCA mutation. And this is just a table, not really but that there are certain areas where there are specific founder mutations. And you can see on the left, the European cohort, and on the right, the non-European cohort, where there are specific mutations identified. And in many places, particularly where there is a limitation on funding, they may start with screening for these common mutations in the in that area where these individuals live. In the United States, what we see, if you look at women with breast cancer, what is the frequency of a BRCA mutation? And what you can see is the highest risk in the United States is women of Ashkenazi inheritance. The second highest risk at 3.5% are Hispanic women. About 2.2% of Caucasian women will have a BRCA mutation, and 1.3% of African-American women, but importantly, the very young African-American breast cancer women under 35, 16.7% will have a mutation. And the lowest rate we've seen has been in the Asian women. What you can see on the right two columns, though, is that for any one of these groups, if there is a family history of breast cancer, the risk is higher of having a BRCA mutation. This is looking at just data from a couple of different databases. And what you can see here is the risk of breast cancer increasing over time in the general population, getting up in the United States to about 11 to 12%. And this, what you can see is data from a couple of different databases where there's a really marked increase in the incidence of breast cancer, and particularly the young onset breast cancer here, where the rapid rise here, a little bit of flattening out after age 60, but this marked elevation in the risk of breast cancer over time for women with a BRCA mutation. If we summarize what the general population cancer risk is and the risk with these mutations, the breast cancer risk in the United States, again, is about 13%. 50 to 72% with BRCA1, 40 to 69% with BRCA2. Ovarian cancer risk, again, general population, 1 to 2%, but goes up to 35 to 60% in BRCA1 and 10 to 27% in BRCA2. Prostate cancer incidence is increased. These genes are not X-linked. They are can be passed as easily through the males as females. Males, as we talked about, obviously don't get ovarian cancer and have a lower risk of breast cancer, but men with the BRCA mutation will have an increased risk of prostate cancer. And pancreatic cancer, which has a general population rate similar to ovarian cancer, 1 to 2%, will have a twofold increase, up to fivefold increase for women, for individuals with the BRCA2 mutation. And this is just looking at curves for the rate of developing breast cancer in BRCA1 mutation carriers and BRCA2 and ovarian cancer. And the reason this is important is because sometimes, we will identify a 50-year-old woman with a BRCA1 mutation, and then we find out her 70-year-old mother has the mutation. What is her risk over a lifetime? It still is elevated compared to the general population, but people do outlive some of their risk. This is a pie chart just showing data from genetic testing in breast cancer. This is for breast cancer patients who visited a genetics clinic. And what you can see here is the vast majority of people, about 82%, have no mutation identified. The remaining about 18%, most of this in blue, will be BRCA1 and 2, but there are about 5% of individuals who have other mutations. And this is a list of these many other mutations. And Dr. Lavoro talked about some of those. This is looking at breast cancer risk in women who have a mutation other than BRCA1 and 2. And what you can see is some of these, such as PALB2, the breast cancer risk is 8-fold elevated. RAD51D, it's about 3-fold elevated. But many of these are, will only increase your risk of breast cancer by about, a 1.5%. And, this is important in addressing, are we going to be doing prophylactic mastectomies in these individuals and other issues with regard to management. So let's shift and talk about ovarian cancer. The best data that we have, I think, comes from the University of Washington, and their program, their genetic testing program is called Brca. And it's named after Paul Brca, who in the 19th century identified families with breast and ovarian cancer. And you can see this pedigree here with the dark circles being individuals who were impacted with cancer. They have really nice data. This is from almost 2,000 women from both the University of Washington, but also from 2 gynecologic oncology group trials. So unselected patients for family history, a variety of ethnic and racial backgrounds and geographic backgrounds. And so they tested these 19 genes in these patients. And what they found, not surprisingly, the most common mutation was a BRCA1 or 2 mutation of about 14.6, almost 15%, and pretty similar in the University of Washington database and the GOG patients. The Lynch syndrome, as we clearly heard from the prior speaker, is associated with both endometrial and ovarian cancer, but they found this only a 0.4% incidence of Lynch syndrome associated ovarian cancer. So Lynch syndrome is relatively rare in ovarian cancer. Then we have some other genes. Again, and importantly, what are the incidence of these gene mutations in these cases? And then what are the incidence of these gene mutations in the general population? And this is from a database called EXAC, over 36,000 individuals. And what you can see is this is cases of ovarian cancer and general population, 29-fold increased incidence of having a BRCA 1 or 2 mutation, a 1 mutation, 12.7% increase in a BRCA2 mutation if you have ovarian cancer. And again, many of these other genes are much more common in individuals with ovarian cancer, but these are less common genes. But the RAD51 genes, PALB2, other genes. Young onset of cancer is one of the hallmarks of hereditary cancers, and what you can see here is looking at of these 1,915 patients, that the biggest chance of having a mutation is in the younger women, age 40 to 49. But even older women have a high risk of having these mutations. So age is not, as Dr. Laboro said, age is not something that we can ignore. There are also data looking at different ethnic groups. No ethnic group is spared. Ovary, peritoneal, fallopian are equivalent, and all histologies, high-grade serous or undifferentiated carcinomas have the highest risk, but no histology is spared from having a mutation. This is a pie chart, and if this looks similar to the one you saw in breast cancer, that's absolutely appropriate. Again, very similar numbers. About 81% of individuals with ovarian cancer will not have a mutation. Most of the mutations will be in BRCA 1 or 2, but there's another 5% or so that have other types of mutations. And this is just a table looking, and I ranked this based on the risk of these mutations, the risk of developing ovarian cancer, or risk of a hazard ratio of 1 would be no difference if you had the mutation or not. But so you can see that very high risks of ovarian cancer with MSH2, one of the Lynch genes, BRCA1, BRCA2, and then these are the risks of breast cancer. So clearly, you know, the breast and ovarian cancer, the hereditary breast ovarian cancer has been defined by BRCA1, 2, but there are other syndromes where there's a high risk of both breast and ovarian cancer, and many where the risk of breast cancer is higher compared to the risk of ovarian cancer. So we really had that broad panel testing that Dr. Laboro talked about is really considered our standard of care. And I just wanted to finish with data for Mary Claire King. She's the person who discovered the BRCA1 gene, and she was awarded this Lasker Koshland Prize, and she has, as someone says, audaciously suggested that all women should be screened for defined categories of BRCA1 and 2 mutations, specifically on these what are known as loss of function mutations. And she advocates for every woman being tested at about age 30 for these because of the prevention capacity that we have. So I'm finished there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. This was great presentation and probably a good learning for the practicing oncologists. And you have, summarized all the clinical trials, which has shown the way for us how to test for the genetic testing. And thank you once again. We have the last presenter for this session. So we will hear now from Dr. Fujiwara from Japan, who will cover clinical trials, basics of clinical trial, along with promising studies in relation to gynecological cancer. So Dr. Fujiwara, please, you're welcome.
My name is Keiichi Fujiwara. I'm serving as a president-elect of IGCS, and very pleased to have this opportunity. So my title of my talk is Clinical Trial Basics and Updates on the Promising Studies. I'm so fortunate that Dr. Coleman has already mentioned about the promising studies, which leads to the approval of a new drugs. So I will focus on the basics of the clinical trials. So what's the clinical trials all about? So if you look at the website of the NIH, the definition of the clinical trial is described as this. this is a research study in which one or more human subjects are prospectively assigned to one or more interventions, which may include a placebo or other control to evaluate the effects of those interventions on health-related biomedical or behavioral outcomes. It's pretty difficult to understand for the lay people. So I try to explain what the clinical trial is all about in my way. So goal of my talk will be, you will understand that the ultimate purpose of a clinical trial is to develop new treatments for the patients who are suffering from disease in which current standard treatments cannot cure. Oops. In other words, you will understand that the clinical trial is an experimental medical treatment for the future patients. And also, you will also understand that clinical trial is not possible to achieve without collaboration of a current patients. So let's get started from asking the questions. So you have a situation here. Suppose that you have a disease and you want to be treated, but standard therapies are not effective. There is one drug that has been shown to be effective in test tubes and in mice experiment too. Question is, do you want to get the treatment using this drug? Answer will be probably not, because the drug was not tested in the human. Okay, this is the situation of the question and answer for you. So I'd like to explain why, the reason why we need a clinical trials. So all the drugs administered to the patients need to be tested in human being for its efficacy and for its safety, which is side effects. This test is called clinical trial. So how can we do clinical trials? So investigators such as Rob Coleman or myself must prepare the test plan, which is experimental plan very carefully, of course. This is called protocol. And also based on the protocol, we want to test the patient. So investigator must ask patient to participate to the experimental treatment. Of course, the patient may think, oh my God, how can I make a judgment to participate or not? So you have to know the rules in the clinical trial. So protocol written by investigators must be reviewed very carefully by experts to ensure the correctness scientifically or ethically. And the experimental plan should be explained to the patients and family thoroughly by the investigator, which is doctor, and research associate using consent form. The patients will have enough time to think about and discuss with the families and then decide whether to participate or not. So you may want to know what's written in a consent form. Important, I'd like to focus on the important components in the consent form. So of course, the purpose of the trial is described. This is depending on the phase of the trials. I will talk this later. And also how the trial will be conducted will be described, such as drugs to be used and tests or examinations which will be used during their trial, or the visiting schedule and so on. And also, very importantly, the consent form describes patient's right, and also risks and benefits by participating in the trial. And I really want to emphasize that top priority of clinical trials is a protection of the patients. So what is the best risk and the benefits of participating to clinical trials? There's a risk because it is not like a daily practice. Side effects of new drugs are not fully known. So you may experience the unprecedented drug side effects. So what is the benefit of participating into the clinical trials? The new drug may be effective for you, but may not be effective for you. Results are not known. That's why we are doing clinical trial. So there is may not be beneficial for you by participating in the clinical trial. However, the results of the clinical trials are beneficial for future patients, even though the new drug is not effective. Because unnecessary treatment will not be provided for the future patients if the new drug is not effective. So we can summarize that the clinical trial is a collaboration with the current patients for future patients. So this is the scheme of the current medical treatment. Patients, you are in the center of the medical teams, doctors and nurses and other co-medical workers are taking care of you, put you in the center of the team. On the other hand, clinical trial scheme is like this. The future patients must be in the center of the team. And also you have to please be aware that the current patients will be one of the team of the clinical trial. This is a very important concept to understand. So I would like to switch the gear a little bit and explain what kind of the trials we have. We have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 clinical trials. For the phase 1 trial is to investigate preliminary information for the side effects and to determine appropriate dose of the drugs. So the patient's number will be about 3 to 30. And phase 2 trial is to investigate preliminary efficacy for the target disease and also investigate the side effects with more number of the patients. So the patient's number will be around 30 to 100. The most importantly, phase 3 trial is to compare the new treatment with the standard treatment to define the true value of new treatment. So this phase 3 trial, patient number will be from few hundred to few thousand. And the phase 4 trial is a phase 4 study It's not actually a trial, but the phase 4 study is to collect the real world data in a daily practice in using the approved drug. So by repeating the clinical trials, standard therapy for many diseases were created. For example, I'd like to show the changes of the standard chemotherapy in ovarian cancer here. In 1990, this is, I have to apologize. It's 1980s. It's not 1890s. 1980s, single agent cisplatin or carbo to combination with a cyclophosphamide was changed. In 1990s, paclitaxel was proven to be more effective than cyclophosphamide. And then in 1999, carboplatin was proven to be more patient-friendly than cisplatin in combination with the paclitaxel. So at this time, the paclitaxel plus carboplatin became a standard backbone chemotherapy for ovarian cancer. In early 2010s, bevacizumab was proven to be effective, and late 2010s, PARP inhibitor were proven to be effective, as Dr. Coleman has already shown to you. However, we have to realize there's a lot of unmet needs. So which patient to be beneficial to those agents? We have to clearly clarify. Probably, as Dr. Armstrong mentioned, we need to test the genetic test or the tumor gene test or many others. Also, what to do for patients who are not responding to these agents, modern agents. Those unmet needs to be resolved in the future. These are the subject of the future clinical trials. So in summary, I'd like to conclude that the ultimate purpose of clinical trials is to develop new treatments for patients who are suffering from disease and which current standard treatment cannot cure. In other words, benefit of a clinical trial is for future patients. Therefore, it is not possible to achieve clinical trials without collaborations with current patients. So I'd like to emphasize this chart, and please remember that you will be the very important part of making new standard treatments. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Fujiwara, for this excellent presentation and telling everyone the basics of clinical trial and the important, the consideration while doing a clinical trial. And it is very, very informative and it was very useful. And somebody from Canada has commented about one of your statements that I love that statement, a collaboration with current patients for future patients. And even I liked it so much. And this gives a very different perspective. So Annie Ellis from USA, can we borrow the slide for when we discuss clinical trials with our communities? So you have so much of fan following here. Everybody has liked your presentation, and now people are just behind your PPT. So if you even I'm one of the person who will need it. So one person has asked that in preclinical trials involving mouse models, do you measure side effects in that mice, or do you even have a way to do this? Or is measurement of side effects only coming from clinical trials?
You're asking to be?
Yeah, this is a question for you. some of the participants. I think, yes.
Uh,
I can't.
so I'm not very clear about the question.
Even I think it's difficult for me to understand also.
I can try and address that. I think the question is, when you're looking at new drugs in animals, in small animals like mice, how do you measure the effectiveness? I mean, you can't, and the toxicities, you can't ask a mouse how they're feeling. But what they do is obviously they look at the tumor growth or shrinkage. They also look at if the animal looks and appears healthy, and in particular, if they're losing weight or not. Many drugs will have to then actually go from a mouse into a primate, like, apes, because they more closely replicate humans. So frequently, if it looks promising in the mouse, it will move into primate tests before it goes into human testing.
There is one complaint, not a question. It's by Curtis Lovell. Majority of clinical trials don't involve participants from Africa. How can this disparity be addressed? So anyone can answer this. Okay.
I don't know if Keiichi wants to address that. There will be a certain amount of care that will be expected to be provided, and testing that is expected to be done for individuals on clinical trials. And there has been, over the last decade or two, an expansion of particularly pharmaceutical clinical trials into areas like India, and some in South Africa, for example, where there is the availability to do, for example, can you get labs done and results back in a short period of time? Can you get the imaging done and have that electronically sent someplace? So unfortunately, I think what the question is addressing is in areas where there's the greatest need, where there may not be as much updated and contemporary healthcare available, that the trials are not being done. So we absolutely recognize that that even in areas of the world where there is access to these, there can be differences in outcomes between different populations of individuals. We know one of the drugs we use in ovarian cancer has very different toxicities and side effects in Asian population patients. So I think we are trying to expand. I think particularly the pharmaceutical companies who really have the money behind them to be able to do that. IGCS and even Gynecologic Oncology Group / NRG, we've been trying to expand our trials to an international scale, so that we can answer the question faster, but that we can make sure that the answers are applicable to all groups of patients with cancer.
Yeah, I'd like to add some more comments about the involvement in Africa. So there is the Gynecologic Cancer Intergroup, which is abbreviated as the GCIG. And this is the global network of clinical trial group. And only missing continent is Africa. So we are now exploring the possibility of involving the involvement of the African friends, and the fastest way is to do some cervix cancer trials, where the in Africa the cervix cancer is more the most prevalent. So the GCIG has a cervix cancer research network, and by collaborating with the South Africa or other the country's friends, we are now trying to explore the possibility of a collaboration of clinical trials there.
One reason I find not to do the research, because of the basic infrastructure. Many of the South African countries not even offering the basic cancer treatment. So it is very, very difficult to conduct a clinical trial with, the medicine which is, innovative. So I have heard that many of the African countries not even have functional mammography machine to even screen their breast cancer. So, many of the people go to Kenya for their cancer treatment. So it is lots of disparity in access to treatment and outcomes. And this point of time, probably going more for and investing more on clinical trials, I think we need to make people aware, because they are not having any idea what cancer is, what breast cancer is, and even though they don't have access to the basic facility. So probably this all socio-cultural determinants need to be strengthened, and we need to work on this area, which is affecting more people. And I think if I talk about immunotherapy in one place where, African country, it will be moonshot approach. But if I talk about doing the cervical cancer screening and doing the, screen and treat, this will be a ground shot approach. So most of the low and middle income countries, clinical trials, immunotherapy look very lucrative and it looks very apt, but probably it is again a moonshot approach. And we need to have a ground shot approaches to deal with the cancer care issues, especially in gynae cancer in low and middle income countries. This is my personal take. And probably we have always talked big things, but probably we are missing the basic thing at ground, which is very disturbing for any oncologist. People might talk in million and billions, but when you see the people's problem are in few dollars, then you will not. Because I went to many of the places where my duty was to ensure that how to just get the community-based cancer screening. When I heard that 60% of the people don't get safe drinking water, 20-30% people don't get food to eat twice a day, can anybody think of doing cancer screening for those people who are suffering? I don't think that cancer is top 10 priorities in their life. They live their life when they get up, and they again, next day they get up and start to live their life. So they live their life on daily basis. So probably for low and middle income countries, IGCS, we need to have more ground shot approaches to deal with preventable cancer, and cervical cancer is one of them. We know that we get so much time to intervene in between, because if once you are infected with virus, it takes 10 to 15 years to develop into cancer. So in between, there is no other cancer, which, that gives you so much time to intervene and, just break that chain from, developing the changes into invasive cancer. So if nobody is having, let me see, because there are people have
I think there is some in the chat about access to clinical trials, and so people can take a look at that.
So this is probably the end of second session. So this was very informative and wonderful presentation, and especially insight and perspective from cancer survivors. Thank you again for joining it. And for me, it was a pleasure to moderate this panel with so many people, good people to hear, and from different area, and you have included all the things which is consideration nowadays for everyone, whether it's a cancer patient, caregivers. And I'm attending the first conference, which is focused on caregivers and survivors. So probably in coming days, we must think about doing more of such kind of event, because we are just restricted to our conferences, doctors. So we talk all kind of sciences, but for which we are working day and night, the survivor. And the most important, I haven't seen any summit or conferences where they have taken care of the caregivers part, which is the most integral component of cancer care, which decides the outcome. So thank you so much for making me this part of this great event, and hopefully, thank you IGCS, and thank you all the organizing committee for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Very well said. I think you've touched on the critical bit of having all the players on the table and just having an honest conversation around how to improve care. Thanks once again to all the speakers for their wealth of wisdom and their inspiring stories. Now we're going to have 3 concurrent breakout groups, one for cervical cancer, the other for endometrial and uterine cancers, and ovarian cancer survivors. Each breakout will be facilitated and will give a brief report to the entire group at the end of the breakout session. And we'll probably just want you to maybe discuss your, just talk about the highlights of the conversations that you've had and perhaps any next steps. Our technical leader, Susan Rolfe, will move you into and out of the breakout rooms. If you didn't select a group when registering, she will assist you in moving to the correct room. Susan, maybe you can raise your hand so they can see you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, great. I'm hitting open all rooms right now, and everyone should get something that says join. So you should just get to join, and then anyone that's left in the room, I can help them move in. So go ahead and hit join. Hello,
Great.
everyone.
Well, it's so nice to see everybody coming back. We had, I apologize to the ovary group. I got transported out of ovary into uterine. So it was very rude. I didn't even get to say goodbye. So hopefully you all had as an outstanding discussion as we did in the uterine group as well. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to join back in. And then I think we're going to give some reports back.
Yeah, I think everyone should be back now. I think we're
back?
good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, then we'll go ahead and start with the uterine one. And Megan Anderson, who is our staff person, was our kind of scribe and note taker. So Megan, do you want to cover for a couple minutes some of the highlights?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. So first, I'd like to thank our endometrial and uterine breakout group for a great discussion. You know, we talked about how cervical cancer is one of the most recognized gynecologic cancers, but we also need to focus and recognize all gynecologic cancers, especially the care and treatment of endometrial and uterine cancers. We also continued the discussion on the concern of clinical trial disparities in Africa and in the US for women of color. This is a large concern, and we all believe education and readily available resources and the availability of treatment should be the main priorities for this. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Perhaps we could have a report from the cervical cancer breakout.
So hi everyone, my name is Sally Agalo. I will thank you so much for this opportunity. So I was the one taking notes for our group, and we had a good discussion. And so some of the issues and concerns that we found were that a lot of people are not willing to be screened yet, and this is because there's lack of information. A lot of people still don't have information. And also the cost of treating cancer is very expensive. So if you screen someone and then you tell them they have cancer, so what next? How do they afford the treatment? And also there's a lot of opposition, some social, some religious. A lot of religious organizations say that they're against the human papilloma virus vaccination that is being rolled out. So you find that that's a big issue, and that is because a lot of people don't have information. And again, we find that awareness for cervical cancer is usually in the month of January, when people have just come from holidays, December, people are settling down to take children to school and a lot of things. So if you talk about cancer during that month, a lot of people don't even bother. So my group was suggesting maybe if it can be moved to another month, say after June or something like that. Another issue is stigma, and not many women can speak openly about cervical cancer, and you find that getting advocates to talk to other women about that is not easy, because many people are not readily available to open up about sharing their condition. And also HPV vaccine has been rolled out, but you find that COVID came and it affected this, so people are not sure whether to take this or to take the COVID one. So there's that. In another country, someone shared that cervical cancer has been bundled with other non-communicable diseases, so you find that it's been lost in there. So a lot of people are not aware about it, and also you find that the National Cervical Cancer Program is not in all countries. So if this can be made possible, it could be a good thing. And another thing was, so the way forward on the issues that we discussed, we said that young girls are being vaccinated, but can we also, the vaccination, if it can be extended to elder girls, like the youth, so that they are sure that when they grow up, then they'll be able to go for screening. And also if we can form a multidisciplinary network team that would involve doctors and professionals, that could really help, because if a doctor speaks, and I would also challenge doctors, being a cancer survivor myself, if a doctor would speak and share the experience of having lived with a certain type of cancer and survived, it would bring more impact than just any other ordinary person talking about that. So I guess that's all about what we discussed. Thank you so much. Oh, so one more thing. Male involvement in advocacy is key, because if we involve, like we say, a man is the head of the house. So if they could also be involved in advocacy matters, it would be a good thing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sally and Megan. I think the common themes that we're hearing are especially around raising awareness, helping to overcome the social cultural barriers, whether it's through involving more men, empowering our women, and basically having a template where we're actually having a multidisciplinary team involving clinicians, caregivers, and patients who are actually speaking the same language. Anyone from the ovarian cancer breakout group?
Hi, I was asked to take notes, and we spent a lot of time on introductions, but we were able to have some conversation. We didn't get to the networking part, so I hope the people in this group can stay after for the networking sessions that are optional afterwards. But we spoke a lot about just the lack of a screening tool or test for early detection, and this still remains our most urgent need. However, recent testing, including UKC tox, didn't meet that mortality improvement threshold, but has provided us with a beautiful biobank where perhaps pan-cancer tests that are in development, like GRAIL, can be tested and hopefully improve their sensitivity, because GRAIL's specificity is pretty high right now. We're also seeing efforts from the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition to try to get more resources are needed in low and middle income countries to even just get the drugs that they need. And we also talked a little bit about lack of predictive biomarkers and drug resistance, especially for people who are not mutation carriers. That space is lacking. OVCAN, they're doing so much great work up there, have an initiative where they're prioritizing work for rare cancers. And there's also the Global Coalition for Adaptive Research that has their Ovarian Cancer RX platform clinical trial. And all these things are going to take a global effort, because ovarian cancer is somewhat of a rare cancer, to really get the basic information and the basic science that we need.
Thanks so much, Annie. And I think you and the team really sort of went to the heart of the matter in terms of, figuring out how to minimize the disparities, figuring out a way to perhaps detect these earlier. So thank you once again to the three spokespeople who were able to give us a brief flavor of the different ways forward and the strategies to employ. Now we're getting back to the main conference and to a very exciting component of it. We're going to Survivorship 101. And we're going to have our moderator, Benda Kithaka. Over to you, Benda.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And I think before the actual moderation of the session, we do have, sorry, we've just gone through that. Sorry about that. This is Benda again. We are going to go through directly into the Survivorship 101. And my name is Benda Kithaka. I'm a 2019 IGCS Distinguished Advocacy Award recipient from Kenya. I will moderate this session. We are focusing on quality of life. Just as we work to improve the quality, the survival rates, that is how long survivors live, we also should be working on improving survivorship, which is the quality of our survival and how well our patients live. We will be having 3 sessions, one by Annie Ellis, a survivor caregiver experience. We'll also have palliative care as a continuum of care by Patience Mbozi from Zambia. And we'll also have a pre and post-operative care, self-care, nutrition, and medication from Michael Powell. To start us off, we will be with Annie Ellis from the USA, who will share her experience with cancer, especially it relates to survivorship. Annie, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, meeting organizers, for allowing me to spend time with you today. I'm going to just really briefly go over my survivor story and then really talk more about how quality of life has been impacted by this cancer diagnosis, because it has just touched every part of who I am. This diagnosis was really unexpected. I'm half Filipino and half Puerto Rican, and there just wasn't a lot of cancer in my family. But in 2004, I was diagnosed at the age of 40 with stage 2C ovarian cancer. I got through first-line treatment pretty easily. I had a surgery and combination chemotherapy, and I really had more trouble with instant menopause than I did with the actual treatment side effects. Those were managed really well, and I didn't have any complications. But then I went into a post-treatment recovery phase where a lot of things were happening. And about a year after I finished treatment, the cancer came back. It was first on the liver, and I went through treatment again, and then it came back in the liver. And then I had to think about treating this as a chronic disease. I did get lucky. I participated in a phase 1 clinical trial that I did not make the antibodies that the trial wanted me to make, but for some reason I'm here, and this third remission is now going to be 14 years in December. But my long-term survival phase has also had its own quality of life issues. I did survive long enough to get a second cancer, an early stage breast cancer. And that brought with it more things. And I've had a lot of genetic testing. I am not a mutation carrier, just lucky twice, but now my focus is to live well with or without cancer. So when we think about that active treatment phase, whether it's chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, all of these things have their effect on our body. And so much was going on, but what was going on inside my head was, how do I manage these side effects? Is this going to be temporary? Is it permanent? When do I call the doctor, or can I manage this on my own? My difficulty was just, I just needed to get through each day. And sometimes I didn't have the energy. I wasn't getting enough sleep. Sometimes I couldn't eat. I've never in my life been too tired to eat. And that was a big deal for me. And sometimes what made a good day was being able to have a bowel movement. But the primary thing that I was focused on was just surviving, just getting through treatment so I can get to the next part. So then came post-treatment recovery. And at this point, there was not a piece of my being that wasn't affected. Not only was I physically healing, but my mental health was affected by just having a diagnosis and everything that comes with it. And my soul, I had some really big questions about why and, what was going to happen next. And so as I was trying to get my life back to where it was, realizing that this was a new normal that I was striving to. And the side effects weren't resolving as fast as I wanted them to. I was having trouble staying positive. The world was telling me I needed to be positive, but I was just so full of uncertainty. And is this going to come back? And what changes should I be making? And survivor guilt, being diagnosed with an early stage cancer brought its own stuff. But the overarching thing that was happening to me was just anxiety, so much anxiety that it felt like it was on my skin. When the recurrences happened, I will tell you, my survivor guilt went away. So I don't recommend that as treatment to clear your survivor guilt. But what started to happen was it just felt like an unending cycle of appointments and more treatment and more side effects and more tests and procedures. And I spent this time really needing to find balance. So what was going on in my head was that my treatment goals had changed. At first it was cure, and then I wanted remission, and then I just wanted the disease to stay stable. And my priorities changed. At first I wanted to be able to go to work and travel, or maybe just do my hobbies, or maybe I didn't want to be bald because I had a wedding coming up and I wanted the pictures to look nice. So, you know, being open and being aware that these changes, and how can I find a treatment that is just going to put the brakes on things and slow it down and not tear me up too much, so that when that stopped working, I can do the next thing. And again, I was hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. And my focus became, you know, fighting cancer was exhausting. I couldn't keep doing it. And so I needed to learn to live with cancer. I got lucky and got to have more birthdays and entered the world of long-term survival. And again, there were some changes that happened to my body that were permanent that I needed to adjust to. A lot of women have long-term side effects of neuropathy or other things. And for me, it's tinnitus. I have ringing in one of my ears 24/7, that when it first started happening, I thought I was going to go crazy. And also understanding, you know, that risk of recurrence, you know, how long is it going to hover over my head? And every time I have a scan, that anxiety comes up. Every time I get my blood tested, you know, the prickles come there. I wanted to understand what the risk of having another cancer, whether having cancer may be more at risk for something else, or maybe the treatment makes me more at risk of having something else happen. And then trying to sort that out. What is, you know, something I need to be worried about, and what is just part of getting older? You know, the ache in my knee, is it not cancer, or is it just the privilege of getting older? And I had healthy living concerns. You know, when I was having my recurrences, it was unacceptable to me. If I was going to die, I was not going to die with just a carrot in my stomach. So I ate a lot of chocolate cake. And during this time between instant menopause, all the steroids, I gained 40 pounds. And you know, when this remission got to 2 years, I thought, oh goodness, maybe I'm going to live. Perhaps I should protect my heart. And so I joined Weight Watchers, lost some weight, and that was really an improvement in my quality of life because I had more energy, I could be more active, I felt better. Now, don't get me wrong, I still have my chocolate cake now and then, but it's not a food group. And last thing I went to get help for was sexual health, because, you know, this is a really important component of our quality of life that we don't talk enough about. And no matter what gynecologic cancer you had, the equipment has been changed, whether through surgery, through treatment, and you may not have some of the parts that we started out with. And so in my head, you know, the underlying thing was just pain during intercourse, and that affected my intimacy, that affects my relationship with my partner, and that brings guilt into this. Even my identity was affected. And who am I? You know, if does this make me a woman? And who am I without these pieces? But the best advice I was given, and I'm just going to say it, is just to stop having painful intercourse, because there are things that they can do to help with the mechanical stuff. And when we start associating pain with something that can be pleasurable in our minds, that's the harder part to fix. So what we need here is, if you have someone to go to for help for sexual health, please do. But it takes a lot of honesty, communication, a lot of patience, and a lot of lubrication. And quality of life and mental health. There are so many things that are affecting us, and it's okay to ask for professional help, especially when our moods and feelings get in the way of day-to-day functioning. Maybe it's just talking with somebody, or maybe there's a little bit of biochemical stuff they can help you with. But we go through PTSD, and it is common to have depression. And please, you do not have to go through this and fix things on your own. It's okay to ask for help. So who can help? Again, self-care. Earlier, Bridget talked so beautifully about that. Our medical team, I reach out to my nurses first, and support group. Hey, the women who can give us hope and lift us up. Tell us where we can get the ginger chews on sale, and, you know, see how everyone's different. But always check with your doctor if you know, when certain things get referred. And here are some resources that I thought were helpful. Just know that palliative care is not a dirty word. It is something that is there to help us. I like this Heal Well Cancer Nutrition Guide. Instead of telling me that a fruit or a vegetable is going to cure my cancer, this tells me how it supports my healing and how exercise helps give me more energy. this About Herb site, everyone's going to tell you what they think is going to cure your cancer, but it may not be scientifically, you have some evidence behind it. I love this website because it tells you what's there and you can read the research yourself. So when is quality of life important? It is important all the time, whether you are on the road with no evidence of disease or whether this becomes a chronic condition. And when should we reach out for help? And whenever we want to, early and often. So thank you so much for your time.
So much, Annie, for sharing your story and sharing your inspirational knowledge of how we can also learn from survivors. We learned so much today from you. And I'm going to invite now Patience Mbozi from Zambia, who will cover palliative care. And as she's putting together her slides, I would want to also just recognize that we have Dicey joining the call. She may not be able to speak right now, but just a shout out, and if we can just click for Dicey as she's joining us on the call today. She's one of the persons recognizing, and her value to IGCS is great. Thank you. I will call on Patience now. Patience Mbozi.
Good afternoon, everyone. In Zambia, it's in the afternoon right now. My name is Patience Mbozi. I'm a palliative care nurse specialist, and I'm going to talk about palliative care as a continuum. Okay, so palliative care has been defined by WHO as an approach that improves the quality of life of individuals and their families, facing the problems associated with life-threatening illnesses through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, which are physical, psychosocial, and spiritual. So when we look at this definition, it's actually conclusive, or it has everything else that palliative care has to offer a patient and their family. And as you can see in the definition, it talks about improving the quality of life, not only of patients, but also their families. And these are facing life-threatening illnesses. And also it means that as we are taking care of those patients, we have to know the disease process of what they are going through, so that we can try as much as possible to prevent and relieve any form of suffering. And if any suffering is experienced by patients and also their families, we have to ensure that we identify this suffering early enough, and we do a very thorough assessment, and we treat the patients to improve their quality of life. And as you can see, pain is actually coming out because so many patients with cancer go through pain, and also other problems like physical problems, which could be because of the disease itself, and also it could be because of the side effects of treatment, and also just the signs and symptoms of what they are going through. Then psychosocial problems could be because of the mind, how they are affected, and also the social problems, social issues, families, their work, their job, and spiritual issues. You find that so many patients will try to find out the meaning of life, and also just their meaning, and the meaning of life and death through the whole situation that they are going through. So when you look at this definition, it's actually comprehensive, and it brings out what palliative care is all about and what is done throughout the whole process of giving palliative care. So the principles of palliative care, when a patient comes, there are so many principles that palliative care specialists work, or that guides their practice. So when you see, the first one is it provides relief from pain and other distressing symptoms, because we understand that many patients with cancer go through pain, and they also experience so many distressing symptoms that disturb their quality of life. And also it affirms life and regards dying as a normal process. Of course, dying is a normal process. Everyone one day is going to die. So palliative care affirms life and regards dying as a normal process. It intends neither to hasten nor postpone death, thereby ensuring that patients live as actively as possible. You'll find that palliative care centers on putting life in patients' days, not just days in patients' lives, so that they can be more active, and so that they can be able to do quite a number of things that they have always wanted to do. And also it integrates the psychological and spiritual aspects of patient care. And also it offers a support system to help patients to live as actively as possible until death. And you know, there are so many support systems that patients have. You'll find that just their fellow patients become support systems, and also certain organizations also become a support system. So palliative care brings those people together so that they can actually support the patients, meaning that palliative care personnel brings in a network of people that could be of support to the patients. And also it offers a support system to help the family cope during the patient's illness and in their own bereavement. So you find that palliative care also puts families also into the whole care system so that they can also benefit, because they go through quite a number of challenges that we may actually overlook. But they need to be cared for, and they also need to be identified, assessed, and also cared for appropriately. So palliative care uses a team approach to address the needs of patients and their families, including bereavement counseling if indicated. So palliative care, like we are talking about, this is a patient that should be taken care of holistically, meaning socially, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. And one person cannot do that to the patient. That's why a team approach is needed and is actually required, where you find that a clergy will come in to assist with the spiritual issues. A social worker and any other and psychologists, they will come in to assist with the psychological issues, social workers, social issues, and also medical personnel will come in, or health professionals will come in to assist with the physical issues. So this patient should be taken care of by the entire team for them to receive a good quality of care. And also it will enhance quality of life and may also positively influence the course of illness. Of course, as much as you are giving it, you'll find that this patient, this care will have a positive influence on the course of illness of the patient. So palliative care is applicable early in the course of illness in conjunction with other therapies that are intended to prolong life, such as chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and includes those investigations needed to better understand and manage distressing clinical complications. So palliative care should actually start when the patient has been diagnosed with cancer. And as we have heard quite a number of testimonies or stories from cancer survivors, we actually understand to say there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of fear. So when the patient has been diagnosed with cancer, they need palliative care at that point. You need to begin to help them cope with the illness and also cope with whatever it is that has happened. And that is called bad news. At the point when they receive that bad news, they need support. And that support should start as early as possible in the course of illness. So when we look at this continuum basically explains how palliative care is integrated in the whole course of illness of a patient. So of course, before the patient is diagnosed with cancer, they will screen, and also the results will come out and the diagnosis will be given. And if a diagnosis of cancer is given, you find that they'll begin to receive active disease-directed treatments. So as you can see in this continuum, the curative care here has got is actually more applicable at the early stage of diagnosis. So once a patient is diagnosed, you find that the focus of the care is more of cure. So these patients will receive different active disease-directed treatment. It could be radiotherapy, it could be chemotherapy, or any other treatment that is given, any other treatment modality that is applicable at that stage. So you'll find that once they receive that, as they're approaching end of life here, as they're approaching end of life, palliative care will be more applicable. And as you can see also the graph here, it is actually more applicable before the patient dies or just during the end of life period. But it is also applicable at diagnosis. Of course, here the patient is able to do quite a number of things. They're able to go for work. They are able to do everything else except they have been diagnosed with cancer. So this is the stage where you give more of psychological support. This is the stage where you break bad news skillfully and help this patient cope with the illness that they have actually discovered. Because of course, it is something that is disheartening, and it is something that disturbs someone's view of the future. So because of that, they need a lot of support, and you find that more of psychological support will be given here at diagnosis. And by the time the patient reaches end of life, they will receive more of palliative care, which is pain management, symptom management, psychosocial support, and also just symptom management, psychosocial support, and also just continuous counseling and all those things. And by the time the patient reaches death, of course, before they reach death, you can begin to give bereavement support and also bereavement care to the family members. Remember, we talked about palliative care involving family members of patients. So they are not actually neglected in the whole palliative care system. You'll find that even when the patient dies, family members are cared for, and they are only allowed to go once they have coped with whatever it is that happens in their family after the loss of their loved ones. But of course, before someone reaches this stage of death, they actually go into the survivorship, like what we have been hearing. So of course, a survivor of cancer should not be neglected. They need support. They still need palliative care support. And this is what we are talking about here. When you look at the stage of survivorship, these are the people that actually need more care of prevention and detection of any other problems that could happen in their phase of survivorship. This is a time when when health behaviors should be promoted, where these patients or these survivors should be told on how they should continue the physical activity. They should also have a good diet that is recommended, tobacco cessation, and also sun protection. And also they should continuously do quite a number of screening procedures to try and identify if there could be any recurrence, or if there's any remission, or if there's complete cure in that phase. And of course, surveillance here is basically talking about assessment of recurrence and also any other late effects. Of course, this is a time that patients go through quite a number of late side effects of the treatment that they received. It could be chemotherapy, it could be radiotherapy. So they would actually go through that, and they continuously need reassessment and follow up by the medical personnel. And also that reassessment also should include treatment of any identified effects. And also the interventions for the consequences of cancer and the treatment should also continue in this phase. This is a patient, like we heard from Annie's story. We could see that she talked about anxiety, she talked about pain. So these patients who are going through physical ill effects or consequences of treatment should be managed. And physical treatment, like we said earlier, these are disease-related physical treatment. This could be recurrence-related, or they could be treatment-related physical effects or maybe side effects. Psychological, of course, this patient will go through a lot of issues of fear. They'll be thinking about where is this thing going to come back, or what is going on, or has it completely gone? Just that worry and anxiety also may need a lot of help. The patient may need a lot of help during that phase, because they'll be thinking a lot and they'll be having that worry and anxiety. Social issues, especially those patients who have gone into survivorship, but maybe they're not able to go back for work. How are they supported, or how are they integrated back into the society so that they can actually do what they have always wanted to do? And spiritual, of course, this is the time that we continue again with the spiritual support and help them understand the meaning of life and death, and the meaning of their lives, the value of their lives, despite what they have, what is going on, or what they have gone through. So of course, the multidisciplinary palliative care team can help manage the primary late effects of cancer survivors, and these are the effects that they normally go through, which are fatigue, depressive symptoms, anxiety and distress, pain, sleep disturbance, fear of recurrence, and also effects on family and work function. So actually, palliative care actually is very important, and it has to go on. And also it has to be extended even to the cancer survivors. The healthcare professionals and everyone in the hospital should not think that they have completely gone out. They still need care, they still need support, and they still need that support that needs to come out from us, the healthcare workers, so that they can actually come out of whatever problems that they may be going through at that point. Thank you so much. I'll end with this quote by Dame Cicely Saunders, who says, "You matter because you are you. You matter to the last moment of your life, and we'll do all we can to help you not only to die peacefully, but also to live until you die. We don't want anyone to be miserable, but we want them to live until they die." Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so very much, Patience, for that enlightening presentation. I especially like how you highlighted the continuum of care that demystifies that palliative care begins at diagnosis, not just at end-of-life care. I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Michael Powell, who will cover pre and post-operative care. Michael, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to talk about pre and post-operative care, perioperative care, self-care, nutrition, and meditation. I'm a gynecologic oncologist and a primary care specialist in New York. So I wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be located. So why is this a problem? Surgery has become progressively safer, more effective, more efficient, shorter recoveries than it has ever been in the past. But still a substantial percentage of our surgical patients report having suboptimal postoperative functional impairment, difficulty with pain, and less than optimal overall satisfaction with their surgery. So there is a need for complementary modalities to improve our outcomes, and I'm going to speak about 3 of those today. So my objectives today are to discuss complementary measures to improve the perioperative recovery, including self-care, nutrition, and meditation. Self-care is defined by the Oxford Languages Dictionary is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. As an example, there is autonomy in self-care and insulin administration. It is also the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during times of stress, and that certainly qualifies in the postoperative period. Expressing oneself is an essential form of self-care. Preoperative self-care or proper prior planning prevents poor performance. Is very important. So the very first thing I would recommend to everybody is that you ask questions. If you don't have any questions, find questions to ask and ask and ask and ask. Ideally, before surgery, you should undergo a preoperative assessment that is personalized with your information. I have a very durable memory of when I was a medical student. I had broken my elbow playing soccer, football, and I needed to have surgery. The anesthesiologist came in to see me that morning, and assuming that I knew everything about medicine because I was a medical student, asked me basically no questions. And it wasn't until I stopped him on the way out to remind him about my allergies that he, I guess, realized what was going on and then asked me the appropriate questions. So make sure that you ask questions. You should prepare oneself. And as we've heard from earlier speakers, one should try as best as possible to refrain from smoking and alcohol consumption in the immediate preoperative period. Eat a well-balanced nutritional diet that is rich in protein, vitamin, and minerals. And it is important to get some exercise, even if one has not been exercising prior to that period of time. And just as important with preparing oneself is to prepare one's home. You should pay attention to your living space. Do you have to go up and down stairs, for example? Where is your bed going to be? How are you going to get to the restroom if you need to go to the bathroom? Who's going to bring your food and prepare your meals if you're unable to do so for a period of time? What about transportation? Can you get around if you need to get someplace, if you need to go to the doctor's office, for example, or to a rehabilitation program? How are you going to get there? As we all know, women provide the majority of family care. Even in a modern world, that's still the case. So who's going to take care of the family? If you have kids, who's going to get the kids ready for school or off the bus, or who's going to help with their homework? And what about pets? All of us, many of us have pets. I have 2 cats. Who's going to take care of the pets if they need to be cared for? What are you going to do about getting your medications? Where are they coming from? If you have to get them after you've had surgery and you have difficulty with transportation, how are you going to get your medications? And obviously, if one is working in the outside the home working world, have you made arrangements with your employer so that your position is covered. So there is a concept of prehabilitation, rehabilitation done before the actual surgery. This is a multimodality approach that involves exercise that can improve your physical function, potentially, if done long enough, change your body composition by decreasing fat and increasing muscle, and improve your cardiorespiratory fitness, which is critical both for safe surgery as well as after surgery. It includes targeted functional exercises that can either minimize or prevent postoperative impairment, as well as dietary interventions that support exercise-induced anabolism, which is building muscle, that can potentially decrease disease and/or treatment-related malnutrition. And then, as we've heard from many people over the course of this morning, psychological interventions because of stress are critically important. It is important to try to reduce stress, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It can also support behavior change and encourage your overall well-being. Postoperative self-care is influenced by a number of factors. First are your individual patient characteristics as a patient, your personal characteristics. The type of surgery that one's undergone, as well as the type of anesthesia that one might receive. Social factors. Somebody lives alone may have a more difficult or maybe even a better postoperative recovery period than somebody who doesn't, as well as one's expectations. It is critically important to be realistic with one's expectations about one's ability to do or not do after surgery. Listen to your doctor, your healthcare provider, your caregiver. They're the ones who are best positioned to give you comprehensive advice. Although this may be the first time and hopefully the only time that you've undergone whatever surgery you've undergone, your doctor, your healthcare provider, and oftentimes your caregivers have done this many, many times and have a breadth of experience that is important to use. It is very important to have a positive mindset. The worst thing to do is to be, oh, woe is me, saying, why did this happen to me? And fall into a spiral where your mind is telling you that things are going bad, because then the physical side is going to go bad as well. One interesting thing that somebody told me a long time ago that worked for her is that she had a recovery buddy. She had a friend, so that when she was having difficulty in the middle of the night and wasn't feeling well, she could call and say, you know, I'm struggling. Can you help me out here? And even if it was just a brief conversation, it was very, very helpful. Appropriate diet is crucial. Again, listen to your doctor, your healthcare provider with regards to their recommendations for the type of diet. And I'm going to talk about diet in just a moment. Don't be a couch potato. Get up and move. I always tell my patients, at least, that the most important thing that they can do, short of having a positive mindset, is to be physically active within the limits that they're able to be physically active. Get up, get out, walk, be active. Don't just sit on the couch expecting somebody to care for you. It is important to be a patient, meaning that surgery is going to cause some changes, and it takes time for your body to acclimate to those changes. But it is also very important to be stubborn. Don't be passive. So again, get up, move around. Don't just accept the fact that you have some pain as an excuse for sitting on the couch or laying in bed. Postoperative nutrition is critically important. In the not so long ago days, women and men who were undergoing major surgery were advised not to eat or drink anything after midnight the night before their surgery. They had a nasogastric tube placed in surgery. They weren't allowed to have anything to eat or drink for several days, usually up to 4 or 5 days, and then their diet was slowly advanced. And it turns out that that was not so healthy. So the Enhanced Recovery After Surgery Program, or ERAS, is a worldwide program designed to achieve early recovery for patients undergoing multiple surgery. It is not just gynecologic or gynecologic oncology surgery. This covers the majority of surgeries, but there is a component within GYN. It It is very clear that surgical stress leads to catabolism, and catabolism leads to increased cardiac demands, increases insulin resistance, it impairs coagulation, it results in tissue hypoxia, and it can distort the pulmonary and GI function, all of which lead to less than optimal outcomes. So the ERS program has sequentially re-examined all the traditional practices. Why do you do it this way? Well, I did it because I was taught that way, and my professor was taught by his or her professor, and they were taught by his or her professor, and so on, back to the remote history of time. And those traditional practices have now been replaced or are being replaced with evidence-based best practices whenever necessary. And I'm fortunate enough to have been an early component of that with dietary research done with my group many years ago that showed that we could feed patients after major GYN oncology surgery immediately after surgery. ERAS is comprehensive and covers all areas of the patient's journey through the surgical process, from the preoperative state to the postoperative state. Nutrition is critical. Preoperatively, we no longer use mechanical bowel preparations as a routine component of surgery. This decreases intraoperative and postoperative fluid and electrolyte imbalances. We no longer have patients fast overnight. Again, this decreases catabolism and improves insulin resistance. And in fact, most of our major surgical patients are given an oral carbohydrate load. There are some prepackaged drinks that they receive immediately prior to their surgery that also decreases catabolism and improves insulin resistance. During surgery, the anesthesiologist routinely administers antiemetic therapy. This encourages early nutrition by mouth after surgery and decreases catabolism. We don't use nasogastric tubes except in very specific circumstances. This is a big change from what it was when I got here almost 30 years ago. This encourages the opportunity, or gives us the opportunity, to feed patients immediately after surgery and further decreases fluid and electrolyte imbalances. Then postoperatively, we feed people either that evening if possible, or certainly by the next morning. We give them a low residue diet. They get liquids on the night of their surgery as long as they're awake enough to do so. They're not intubated or have other medical conditions that would limit their ability to take oral intake. And then we use a variety of nutritional supplements to try to help improve their wound healing. That's the physical side of this. The psychosocial side of this is also critically important. And as Plato wrote almost 2,000 years ago, the part can never be well until the whole is well. There is an increasing awareness that our psychological conditions influences our physical conditions, and this acceptance has led to mind-body therapies such as mindfulness meditation that I'll talk about next. There are demonstrable diverse benefits to mind-body therapy. These include reducing anxiety, depression, and overall general psychological distress, all of which obviously are very common in women with a cancer diagnosis undergoing major surgery on a gynecologic oncology service. It improves cardiac health. It improves immunity. It's been associated with decreased chemotherapy-associated symptoms, and we were fortunate enough to do some studies on that in the past. And it's been shown to decrease the need for pain medication. It doesn't eliminate it, but it decreases it, all of which are good. Mindfulness meditation is one example of a mind-body therapy. It's defined as a form of meditation or induced relaxation that focuses one's awareness on breathing and encourages positive attitudes that help to achieve a healthy, balanced mental state. It was derived from sati, which is the first factor of the 7 factors of enlightenment within Buddhist practice, and it's based upon Zen, Vipassana, and Tibetan meditations techniques. It is readily available. There are self-help books for people who still actually read a physical book, DVDs for those who actually have DVD players as opposed to web-based apps. There are online courses, individual training, professional groups, and so on and so forth. So just as a primer for meditation, meditation for beginners, one should sit or lie down in a comfortable position as relaxed as possible where one won't be interrupted. Close your eyes, place an eye mask or a hand towel over your eyes that helps discourage distractions, and make no effort to try and control your breathing. You should breathe as you would naturally, and you'll find that that will change over time. Focus attention on breathing and how one's body moves with each breath on inhalation and exhalation. Take note of that movement as you breathe normally. Observe your body. Focus your attention on your breath without controlling the pace or intensity. If, as is fully expected, your mind wanders, then work to return your focus back to your breath. Maintain it for 2 to 3 minutes to start, and then as you become more comfortable, you should increase the time. So in summary, although our perioperative care has steadily improved and continues to steadily improve, a reasonable substantial, it's been 40% or so in some of the studies, of surgical patients continue to report postoperative functional improvement, pain relief, and overall satisfaction that is less than optimal. So we're not doing as well as we hope to be doing. We've done better than we have in the past, but there's still room to grow. The integrative health practices will coordinate conventional and complementary approaches to postoperative and perioperative care. There is an emphasis on treating the whole person. I'm a palliative care specialist, and this is my emphasis in everything that I do within medicine. It is multimodal, and it improves care coordination amongst the different providers that take care of every individual. There are a variety of other complementary therapies. I just focused on one with mindfulness meditation. These other therapies also help postoperative recovery, including acupuncture, aromatherapy, music therapy, hypnosis, and where appropriate, massage therapy. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank IGCS and all the members of IGCS for the opportunity to be a member of IGCS. I think the world, unintended, of the group and those who are within the group and everything that we do to take care of the women that entrust their care to us. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that very frank and solution-oriented presentation. I was concerned you were going to ask us to close our eyes and start meditating, and that would have been the end of this presentation. What an outstanding panel today, and I feel we can continue engaging with the panel, but I would ask that we continue asking the questions on the chat and engaging with the panelists as we go along. Again, thank you so much, Annie, Patience, and Michael. As we move on, Miriam, I would like to just invite you back for the nice tribute to caregivers. Miriam?
Thanks so much, Benda, and for the previous speakers. I think just for really highlighting the importance of our unsung and frequently underappreciated heroes, so to speak. Sometimes as clinicians, we tend to focus in on the patient and sort of really get intense around that. But as patients and Michael have pretty much shown, there's definitely a need to engage with the caregivers, make sure they understand what's going on, because frequently the same stresses that the patients are going through are what the caregivers are experiencing, and sometimes there's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. So it's important, I think, to engage them. And so first we would like to recognize all the caregivers at the summit. If you're currently or have ever been a caregiver for a cancer or other serious disease survivor, if you could kindly raise your hand using the Zoom function. Excellent. I think I see quite a number of hands up, and I think that just bears testament to the fact that with the current prevalence of some of these conditions, we've all either been affected or had an experience of being a caregiver. And so I think it's pretty much to celebrate you, keep fighting the good fight for our cancer warriors, and ultimately knowing that we acknowledge and celebrate you too. I think we're finally going to recognize the caregivers. We had asked you to slot in some names of caregivers, and we're going to celebrate, or at least publicly recognize some of the names that you had submitted. And I think there's quite a number, but we're going to read them out very quickly. There's Dicey, the ever impressive Dicey Scroggins, Lonnie Ellis, Gladys Quenda, MSF Belgium, Emil Nakin, I hope that's how you pronounce it, Helen Keda, Sunita Aurora, Jose Carlos Sadala, Anyaldo Lopez da Silva Filo, Kanguya, Millicent. I'm not sure, there's a bit of an echo, but I think Millicent just got an additional shout out. But Udi Soko, Akiba Perry, Kwabena, Andrew Thomas, Omar Murray, Sheila Jackson, Indra Jasuja. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think let's publicly acknowledge our ideas to just give our thanks to you. Keep doing what you do. Thanks, Banda. I think we can all take another clap now that our hands are raised, but we celebrate you all. And so moving on to our next final panel. This is going to be, again, pretty brilliant, exciting as usual, empowered through patient advocacy. Benda, back to you.
I am delighted that this last session is looking at empowered through patient advocacy. After we've learned all this information, then what do we do with it? Where do we take it? And so today we are joined by yet another fantastic panel to discuss advocacy, which is indeed important and actually essential to connecting and empowering survivors and educating the public. Let's keep the questions coming through the chat feature. We'll address as many as we can during on the chat as we move on. To our last presentation, we will start with Sally Quenda, who is a cancer survivor from Kenya, who will share her story and her perspectives. Sally, you do have 5 minutes, and because you don't have a slide, I would ask you to put on your camera so that others can see you as you're speaking. Thank you so much, Sally. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Benda. And Benda is a colleague and a mentor in Kenya. Thank you so much. So my story began in 2007. I asked myself, why? Why did I get cancer? Because I was already battling HIV and I'd lost 2 children, and now I'm being told we have to remove your uterus. And it wasn't easy for me. I was only 38 years old. Unfortunately, the cancer spread to the colon in 2010. And going through all this, I didn't allow it to define who I am. I knew I was a strong woman, and I knew that life could still go on. So I decided to put it behind my mind, and as long as my heart was beating, I said I will do something about it. So I'd lived with HIV for some time, and there's a lot of advocacy. We all know that HIV in advocacy, they've done so much, and that's why things are different, and we have to maybe copy some of these things that are happening with HIV. So I said, I will not let cancer define me. And one of the things I have said to myself, that the pain that I went through with cancer, I wouldn't want any other woman to go through. And from that time, after the treatment, I went through the treatment, and from 2012, I've been very actively involved in telling women that it's very important that you go for the screening for at least do a pap smear once a year. Because when I did mine, I did not have any symptom at all, and I was told I had stage 2 cervical cancer. So I tell them, please do not wait for pain, because sometimes in cancer there's no pain, so you better start early. And women also who have children, I encourage them to also get the HPV vaccine. And one of the things that have encouraged me to do what I do, and I must say, Benda is here as a mentor, she encouraged me that it is possible to do whatever you want to do, and you can achieve a lot even despite you having gone through all you've gone through. So in 2010, Benda, was it 2010, 2019? When Benda organized for a mountain climb, 2019, Benda organized for a mountain climb, and through Kilele, we were able to do it with other cancer survivors. And for me, I added that to my story, and it was a great achievement. I must thank Kilele Health for enabling me to get that opportunity to do that. So I stand up and say that it is possible to live with whatever condition. I'm living after I got the cervical cancer and did the total hysterectomy. I got a recurrence again in 2010 in my colon, and right now, as I'm speaking, I live with a stoma and I have to wear a bag every day. And I went up the mountain with the bag, and like I'm here to say that it is possible to achieve whatever you want to achieve in life. It doesn't. You shouldn't allow any chronic condition to define you, and especially cancer. And I'm grateful that a lot of survivors have been invited in this forum and we're able to share our stories. That means that even after cancer diagnosis, there is life, and we continue speaking and encouraging other people to get screened and to know their status early. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your bravery in sharing your story and also continuing to show people that there is life beyond a cancer diagnosis. There is life beyond any life-threatening disease. We are inspired by your story and I honor you. We move on, and I would want us to hear from Elizabeth Bow. Elizabeth is an IGCS Distinguished Advocacy recipient who will also share her experience with the power of patient advocacy worldwide. Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the technical delay. Thank you so much for inviting me to your Survivor Caregiver Summit this morning. I really welcome this opportunity to talk about the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition and patient advocacy in action. This year marks our 10th World Ovarian Cancer Day campaign and our 5th year as a formal coalition. It also marks some pretty big personal milestones, forgive me, but I am retiring as CEO of Ovarian Cancer Canada after 24 years, and it also ends my term as chair of the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition, although I will remain on the board. And as I was preparing for today, I remembered one more milestone, that in 2012, IGCS, the annual meeting, came to Vancouver, and Ovarian Cancer Canada hosted with IGCS the first Survivor Symposium. And so this is a 10th anniversary milestone for this meeting as well. So there couldn't be a more perfect moment to reflect on how this global patient advocacy movement has developed, and really over the past 20 years, and the impact that we have had in working together. As with most movements, the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition started out small. It literally began with a handful of like-minded leaders from ovarian cancer organizations that decided the time had come to launch World Ovarian Cancer Day to shine a greater light on the disease. Looking back, I marvel at how quickly we were able to mobilize that first year. We actually only had 4 months to prepare. We had 30 participating groups sign up and take part in the campaign. I remember how heartened we were by the level of enthusiasm and engagement with that first World Day campaign. But we could also see that there was great appetite to do more together, and a recognition of the potential to strengthen all of our work by working together nationally and globally. We established the coalition in 2016 as a formal entity so that we could take on more activities, and that was a natural next step. When we did establish the coalition, we explicitly committed to work on behalf of all women with ovarian cancer, wherever they may live. We have a saying when we review our coalition priorities and plans, and that is, we do not want to operate like a G7. By that, we mean that we do not want to only represent the interests of a small group of nations that have greater social and economic wealth. That is why our first major initiative as a coalition was the Every Woman Study. It was clear from the outset that a gap existed in the evidence base about the experience of women globally who are impacted by this disease. The Every Woman Study remains the largest global review of the experiences of women living with a diagnosis of ovarian cancer of its kind. It's based on responses from more than 1,500 women from 44 countries. The study was also informed by clinicians and a thorough review of the literature. We were delighted that it was accepted for publication in the International Journal of Gynecologic Cancer. The Every Woman Study has proven invaluable in so many ways. It has allowed us to connect with patient advocacy organizations from around the world in a meaningful and practical way. It has also provided the basis for really productive conversations with clinicians, researchers, and those connected with global cancer policy. The study has given us a detailed global picture, including important insight into the lack of data about ovarian cancer, which we must have to urgently drive change. Importantly, for many of the countries that took part in the study, it has provided a benchmark for comparison globally and to other countries on issues related to ovarian cancer awareness, time to diagnosis, access to treatments, and access to information and support. Overall, the study found that no one country has it right, that there are significant opportunities, and that's the good news, to learn from each other. For example, women in Germany had the shortest time to diagnosis, but much less access to specialist clinicians that are key to successful treatment. Women in the UK have almost universal access to specialists, but the lowest proportion of women who are diagnosed within a month of visiting a doctor. Women in Japan had one of the shortest times to diagnosis, but very little access to genetic testing, and they were least likely to get the emotional support that they needed. Women in the USA were most likely to wait more than 3 months before consulting a doctor about symptoms, but they were also most likely to receive genetic testing. And women with ovarian cancer in Hungary were most aware of the symptoms of ovarian cancer before their diagnosis, but they were much less likely to be offered surgery to treat their disease. We know from the patient advocacy partners that we work with that the study findings have provided extremely useful evidence already to advocate for improvements at the country level. The study has been referenced in numerous publications, shared at conferences and meetings, and is frequently used by patient advocates to lobby politicians, policymakers, and healthcare providers. As an example of how the study can be used by national organizations, one of the last pieces of advocacy work I oversaw as CEO of Ovarian Cancer Canada was implementation of the Every Woman Study Canadian edition, where we adapted the study to be specific to the Canadian context. Our version of the study received over 500 responses from women from across the country, and it has already provided extensive insight on how Canadian women experience ovarian cancer, including what drives women to consult a healthcare provider about their symptoms, what impacts how long it takes to get to an ovarian cancer diagnosis once medical attention has been sought, regional variations in genetic testing, treatments, and clinical trial participation, the substantial physical, emotional, practical, and financial impact of an ovarian cancer diagnosis, gaps in information provided to women throughout their cancer journey, and a need to engage a more diverse population of women. We are still consulting on the findings, but they're already informing Ovarian Cancer Canada's priorities for national and regional advocacy going forward, as well as the development of key resources to better support those faced with an ovarian cancer diagnosis. The World Ovarian Cancer Coalition has also spent considerable time consulting with global colleagues on the findings of the study, and this engagement informed the development of a global ovarian cancer charter that we proudly launched at the 2020 IGCS annual global meeting. The charter is a rallying call to the global community to join forces around 6 key goals that, if we effectively tackle, could bring us much closer to our vision of every woman having the best chance of survival and the best possible quality of life, regardless of where she may live. The goals draw directly from the Every Woman Study findings and include 2 overarching goals on the need to recognize ovarian cancer as a global priority and the need to improve the data that is collected. We need that so that we can promote stronger cancer control plans for ovarian cancer at the global and at the national levels. The goals also include a call to reduce the length of time it takes for women to be diagnosed, the need to raise awareness of the importance of family history and genetics, and for improvements in access to treatments and support. Ovarian cancer patient organizations have played a significant part in promoting the charter goals within their own countries. They have also played an enormously important role as charter champions. Charter champions are organizations that showcase how some of the challenges highlighted in the charter can be overcome, We now have close to 20 truly inspiring organizations that have shared activities and initiatives that support the Charter goals. By sharing their innovative work, these champions are leading the way and inspiring others. Their initiatives include everything from personalized risk assessment tools and innovative clinical trial databases that can search based on details of a woman's clinical diagnosis, including her tumor genotype, through to training and mentoring programs for clinicians. I would encourage everyone to visit the Coalition website and review the work of the Charter Champions. If you have a project or an initiative that you would like to share as part of the Charter Champion program, I do encourage you to do so. Going back to the Every Woman study and our commitment to representing the interests of all women wherever they may live, we did know when we launched the Every Woman study in 2018 that we did not have the level of participation from low and middle income countries that we wanted. This is partly because of the online nature of the study, but also because we were still developing partnerships and networks in those settings. But we have remained absolutely steadfast to addressing this gap. The fact is that nearly 70% of women who are diagnosed with ovarian cancer live in regions and countries that are mid to low income. It is a significant population that we must not overlook. So we're delighted to say that we share this concern about health equity with IGCS, and it's our great honor now to be working with IGCS to implement, as partners, the Every Woman Study Low and Middle Income Edition. This version of the study will be implemented in up to 31 mid to low income countries, involving up to 300 healthcare settings. It's an exciting and challenging undertaking. We're 100% committed to making this work. I am truly humbled by the level of enthusiasm and commitment to the project, especially during these challenging times with a pandemic. We're working closely with patient advocacy groups, patient advocates, and healthcare professionals on the ground who will be responsible for implementing the study in their own countries. We could not hope to find a better partner than IGCS, and a very special thank you and shout out to Dicey, Scroggins, and Mary Aiken, who have demonstrated IGCS's commitment to health equity through concrete action. They have put genuine and dedicated effort into this project, and we know that together we are going to be able to achieve success. The Every Woman Study Low and Middle Income Edition will start in earnest in 2022, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to start sharing preliminary findings with you early in 2023. Because of our preliminary work of the Every Woman Study in low to middle income countries, we've already made some new and powerful connections, and we're even seeing early successes. A couple of examples. When we approached the Women's Coalition Against Cancer in Malawi to see if they would be interested in working with us, they went one step further and approached the Health Ministry to secure their support. The Health Ministry responded very positively by encouraging directly cancer centers across the country to participate in the study. In Malaysia, preliminary discussions about the study prompted women with ovarian cancer to set up the first ever ovarian cancer patient support group in that country. We are greatly encouraged, and we believe that these kinds of achievements bode very well and, most importantly, have the potential to drive big change. So from our small beginnings in 2013, we're here today, working with nearly 200 patient advocacy partners worldwide. World Ovarian Cancer Day has grown from a campaign that engaged about 50,000 people worldwide to now over 18 million people. And I'm delighted to say that this year we have extended our board of directors of the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition to include representation from Nigeria and Bangladesh. It's been my great pleasure to work with patient advocacy organizations from around the world and with survivors and caregivers as part of this growing global movement. I know that we're more powerful together. And I wrap up with this quote, which I know so many of us are familiar with, but Richard Branson referred to it in his book in 2011. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And he built on it. Changing the world is no mean feat, But this quote reveals one of the great truths of the world. First, the world can. Second, every great movement in the world starts with a group of people who simply refuse to believe and accept a situation. They gather their ideas and their passion and they drive forward. If there's a problem, they solve it or they simply overcome it. They are not intimidated by the odds. And I can't think of a quote that more personifies this courageous and brave group of patient advocates globally. They are not intimidated by the odds. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so very much, Elizabeth. Wow, I am lost for words. And it is evident why it is that today you received the IGCS Distinguished Advocacy Award, because truly you have brought to the fore evidence-based advocacy, and that is what we need to be able to move the needle on policy that serve our people. I am very hopeful that the Every Woman study in LMIC countries will also include Kenya. If not, sidebar me. Now, back to you, Miriam. We've had fantastic, outstanding presentations. It has been my pleasure and honor to moderate these sessions. I'm giving back the mic to Miriam so that she can take us forward to the next session. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh. And thank you, Benda, for the excellent moderation, and really to our speakers for that inspiring call to arms. And I mean, with Sally sort of challenging us to step outside our comfort zones and become advocates in whichever capacity that we have. And really, Elizabeth, for, you know, just honing in on that need for data-driven research that's actually going to, I mean, policymakers only understand, you know, economic arguments. And so if we have that data, we have the research, and it goes a long way towards ultimately shifting the needle, as Benda says. So we're going to take a second stab at, we switched it up earlier, and we were trying to recognize the youngest survivor. And we started with the oldest earlier. So we're going to try and run it again and see if it works. So again, we would encourage you to use the raise your hand function. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 10 seconds each, and say, we'll start off with probably about, if you've been a survivor for more than 7 years, would you kindly raise your hand? If you've been a survivor, I can see some hands going up. If you've been a survivor for 6 years or less, would you raise your hand? Okay, see some hands. If you've been a survivor for 5 years or less, could you raise your hand? Okay, see some hands. If you've been a survivor for 4 years or less, could you kindly raise your hand? If you've been a survivor for 3 years or less, could you kindly raise your hand? If you've been a survivor for 2 years or less, could you kindly raise your hand?
Okay, so we're back to 3 years, it looks like, yes? Colleen and Nefertari, yes?
Colleen and Nefertari?
Do you want to let us know how long? We'll see which one wins.
Okay.
I've just been 3 years.
3 years?
Okay.
I'm in recurrence now. Sorry.
Go ahead, Nefertari.
Oh, I made 3 years in July of this year.
Oh, so this is close, neck to neck. So Colleen, when did you make 3 years?
Mine was June. She wins.
Oh.
Yeah, no, mine was June. I'm currently in recurrence right now.
Yeah, but I think so. Susan, we have a winner, Nefertari, and she is going to receive this lovely leather journal you see on the screen, and Susan's going to share that. and to document, Neftari, this is basically to document your journey and other life moments. And at this very moment, you are receiving the collective support of every summit participant. And once embraced by this community, always embraced. Congratulations. If we can just raise our hands once again to Neftari.
Thank you.
I'd also like us to raise our hands. It was a close second, just to support Colleen as well. You really ran a good race. We're celebrating you as well. So let's raise our hands to Colleen as well. Excellent. And so, Neftari, you probably had a chance to sort of share your story earlier, but perhaps if you could maybe just share if there's one thing that you would like to share with the community here who is sending you loads of love. What would be the one thing that you would like to share with the community here?
That, as it's been said earlier today, that cancer doesn't define me. And, through my cancer diagnosis, I've, become stronger and more resilient, and wanting to know more about, my diagnosis and the efforts to help other women with gynecologic cancer diagnosis.
Thank you so much, Neftari. And we're also going to ask Colleen just to briefly tell us a little about where she's from. Again, we're here for you, we support you. We'd just love to hear a little more about your story as well.
I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. I was diagnosed in June of 2018 with low-grade serous ovarian cancer, so one of the rarer forms. And I've been working with OVCAN, Patient Partners in Research, as has been mentioned by Donna earlier. So in regards to, we help fund grants and determine what grants are fundable for research and finding cures and treatments. And I'm a survivor's, basically a survivor buddy for many of the patients here. And I just continue to fight because I've been in reoccurrence now for almost a year. And they're still trying to find some type of treatment for me. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Colleen, for sharing your story and really inspiring us. As you said, keep fighting, keep moving forward. We're all here to support you, and the work you're doing around supporting and becoming a buddy for other patients is amazing. So thank you once again. We celebrate you both, Neftari and Colleen. We're getting to the close of the meeting, and I'm going to hand over to Mary Aiken, the CEO of IGCS, to give our closing remarks. Thank you.
Well,
over to you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and everyone today for just an outstanding program. And of course, to our leader in this, Dicey Scroggins, who really has put so much time and effort and so much thought into programs like this. It really warms my heart to have Dicey on our team, and I know she's listening in today and with us. So also a thank you to Susan and Megan and all of you who shared your time and volunteering to make this such an important program. Of course, AstraZeneca, Clovis, and GSK, we really couldn't do things like this without your support, and using all of our efforts to continue to move advocacy and patient, survivor, and family caregivers forward. So thank you all again. We have a very exciting roundtable coming up. I think that will be in early December, Dicey is planning, and the idea and theme behind that is in health equity and disparities. So I think Dicey's plans are to make it that it's more than just a conversation, but it really is putting things into action. And I think Elizabeth today helped us understand one of the ways in which we're doing that through our work in low middle income areas of the world with them. So with that, I wish you all well. I hope I see you regularly and frequently. We will be in person in New York. Hopefully nothing will get in our way again this time, but thank you again so much. We are recording this session, so it will be available on our website, and the team will communicate that out. We can stay on for a little bit longer if anyone likes, and have conversations or talk about anything or get to know each other a little bit better. It's certainly not required. I know it's been a long day already. So thank you again for your attention. Thank you again for all of your commitment to being advocates for others as well as yourself. Take care.